That guy is the strongest there is. After his family was ambushed on their yacht, he was abandoned and left adrift at sea. Following that, he trained relentlessly, like a monster. Captain, and the ship's bodyguard. He suddenly sees a body nearby and realizes something horrible. After all, sinking lower and lower in front of him were both his father and his mother. Look at each other again, uncomfortably distrustful. The woman says that, unfortunately, they only have one package left. Taea sighs deeply, clearly annoyed by the situation. The plane landed roughly as he commented that he was surprised that the newcomer, who had been inactive until then, had complete control. The other agreed, adding that this individual held the key to their future. As the plane taxied down the runway, it was explained that the Cheongu security force was the main force responsible for protecting the organization, with specifically defined powers. It was also detailed that the members of this force only obeyed the orders of Junsubak and were prohibited from engaging in commercial activities within Cheongu. However, footsteps could be heard as it became clear that Cheongu security members with notable intellect, power, and political vision could, as an exception, be integrated into the board of directors. At that time, Dogongan, one of Cheongu's directors and Junsubak's official successor, as well as a neutral member of the board, walked down the stairs. Although he was only a director in name, he had Junsubak's absolute favor and served as an idol for the entire security team. His eyes, they maintained a serious and focused demeanor as they looked ahead. The two men waiting for him bowed deeply, showing their gratitude for him making the trip all the way there. Ahead, behind him, a row of uniformed men stood at attention as the entire Cheongu security contingent formally assembled to welcome him as their director. The scene then shifted to the South Sea in South Korea, where a ship glided under the bright sun. A woman with scars on her back remarked that he must have been in a hurry to arrive by helicopter, and that if he had contacted her sooner, she would have come to meet him herself. He casually replied that everything was fine, since the person with pending matters was the one who needed to. Withdrawing, he asks him to give that package to the other man, since he will be fine without it. The guy continues to stare at him as the boy walks away. After the man finishes his, make the visit. And then he changed the subject. A large striped marlin was hanging, and he commented that it looked like it weighed almost 900 pounds, asking if it had truly been caught, with only a spear. He responded that the fish was well known among the local divers, famous for being a bully that tore fishing nets and caused all sorts of trouble. Meanwhile, a woman watched from the Ain ship. The Yan family of Cheongu, the founders of the council, had existed for hundreds of years. With legs marked by crisscrossing scars, he explained that in Cheongu, his role in the directive was to oversee the other factions in order to maintain the balance of power. Arinjon, one of Cheongu's directors and also a neutral member of the directive, offered raw fish and drinks to those present. Little was known about her organization, which was composed of women whose strengths and abilities rivaled those of the 10 most powerful individuals in Ocean. Smiling, the visitor politely declined the invitation due to a lack of time, and said that he had come to inquire whether she was already aware of the situation involving Director Injuhan. She responded. He quickly confirmed that he was aware of the situation. He then mentioned hearing that their representative was a man named Suok Jin, a name quite familiar to everyone, and a flashback revealed to the third son of the late President So Kohin, who had died 17 years ago. The visitor wondered how the representative could be someone who was already dead. Clenching his fist, he pondered that perhaps it was a ghost, but he soon concluded that there was actually someone who had turned into a monster and was now making his return. He then declared that he was there to formally request that the council issue a bounty for the man responsible for the murder of his family. He wanted to see him dead, and the reward was set at 20 billion won. The story, shopping, he meets the protagonist outside, who politely asks if he could possibly borrow a cigarette. However, he responds by asking if he couldn't just go, reverts to 17 years in the past. Wohin, President Sokojin's eldest son, ran while asking his father to wait a minute, all under the watchful gaze of a woman. At that moment, a man, he questioned why Suyok was even considered his son, saying the least he could do was offer an explanation before leaving. The other son agreed, insisting their father should say something. Just as the car door closed before departing, Sokojin, founder of the Cheongu Group, responded by asking if he needed their permission to do as he pleased. Despite their protests and pleas, he called them insolent brats, cutting off any possibility of dialogue. As the vehicles drove away, the sound of their engines fading, one of the sons, he commented that, despite everything, their father was truly impressive. Suyok, the third son, reflected on the patriarch's lack of consideration, especially towards those who accompanied him on this sudden trip. Everything was done impulsively, and now he had to deal with his older brother's reaction. The woman, resigned, stated that what's done is done, suggesting they buy a painting to alleviate the situation upon their return, as his brother was fond of such gifts. However, Taea, who was only 10 years old at the time, rejected the idea, claiming that it could be misinterpreted and make him even angrier. Shortly after, the squeaking of a gate signaled the arrival of the cars. Suyok thought to himself that this was undoubtedly a headache, regretting that his father hadn't at least kept his trip around the world a secret. The convoy proceeded through the gate, as the sound of engines reverberated throughout the property. From the back seat, Taea watched the scene with surprise, gazing out the window at what was unfolding before her. Men bowed in to another convenience store. But Tae explains that it has been a long time since he was last in Korea, so he would like to try that quickly. The guy gives up trying to avoid him, reverence, addressing him as President Jin, and wishing him a safe return. Even witnessing this display, the president stated that he had already requested they not do that, reminding them that everyone there, they were executives who had earned their positions. He only requested that they look after the company and refrain from making rash decisions until he returned. W reacted with disdain, muttering unpleasant remarks about those in attendance. He asked that I pay close attention to what was happening. He explained that most of the people present had been saved by his grandfather, which was how they had gotten to where they were, with the protected. Over time, many became loyal followers, drawn to the founder's undeniable charisma. Some even made spontaneous oaths of loyalty, never expecting anything in return. He mentioned that these people were known as loyalists, and he was convinced that they would also be useful to Taea in the future. The narrative then shifted to a busy street, surrounded. Change. He mentioned that these people were known as loyalists, and he was convinced that they would also be useful to Taea in the future. The narrative shifted to a busy street, surrounded of commercial establishments beneath the orange hues of the sunset sky. Pedestrians moved with rhythmic steps along the sidewalk, marking the pulse of daily life. The location was in Jeongjin City, Yeoni Province. From Jeongjin, Yeoni Province. As he walked, he pondered the former loyalists, wondering if any were still active within Cheongu. He explained to Gray that these were individuals who had sworn allegiance exclusively to his grandfather, and now he tried to imagine if at least one of them was still around. Gray asked him to wait a moment, stating that he would check the files, left behind by his father. As he typed with agility, he asked if any names came to mind. While reviewing the files on the various monitors in front of him, he muttered to himself. As he hands him one of the cigarettes, he comments that he can't believe someone would want to try that tasteless thing. Walking away, the man says that he will get a fine if he smokes there. So that it wasn't there, nor even there. Gray, surprised, asked if he truly remembered all the names even after so much time. The answer was simple. There were fewer than 20. So it was easy to remember. Still, Gray continued the search, but confessed that he wasn't finding anything relevant, which only confirmed what he already suspected. He felt disheartened, imagining that perhaps no one else was left. He remembered that all the loyalists had sworn fealty only to Grandpa, and knew that Woe probably wouldn't have forgiven any of them. It was then that Gray, with a flash of enthusiasm, claimed to have found something. However, he found it strange that the records were still active in the personnel database, given that the man in question was retired. He reported that there was a bar registered in his name located right in Yeongjin, and that he would look up the address. A short time later, the pub door opened with a slight sliding sound. As soon as he entered, he was greeted with a friendly smile by a man behind the bar, who greeted him cordially. Ta then asked what the best dish in the house, to which the waiter responded by gesturing towards the menu behind him. With conviction, he assured the customer that they only served the best, and suggested the fresh mackerel that had just arrived that day. He accepted the suggestion without hesitation and ordered a portion. Next, the waiter inquired whether he would like a drink. The client preferred to decide after eating. Eat, responding with a slight smile on his face. The other smiled back, mentally processing the order for a brief moment. Immediately afterward, he picked up the fish and slammed it forcefully onto the cutting board. On the other side of the bar, attentive eyes followed each movement, as a wide, shiny knife was wielded with expertise. It was then that the young man sitting recommends that he wait until he reaches a designated smoking area. Observing the situation, Tae admits that, when you've been in a mafia for about 17 years, a simple glance is already enough to. He inquired as to when the real owner, Won Suju, would appear. That day, the waiter reacted with a nonchalant smile, asking who exactly he was talking about, and stating, immediately, that he himself was the owner of the place. The response, however, was immediately refuted by the visitor, who claimed that wasn't true, which confused the man behind the bar. He wanted to understand what that exactly meant. The other, maintaining a steady gaze, admitted that he was no expert in raw fish, and then paused intentionally before continuing. He noted that the knife used was not suitable for cutting fish, suggesting that the disguise could have been more convincing. Before any response was given, the bartender, he advanced with a sudden blow. At the same instant, a blade emerged, blocking the attack and producing a metallic roar. The impact was so strong that the tip of the larger knife, big one, broke. Surprised, he wondered if that smaller blade had really caused that damage. The young man jumped back, just as the pub door opened, and an older man entered, scolding John Bin for leaving the lights on and not caring about the electricity bill. However, upon seeing the scene in front of him, he stopped with a confused expression. The waiter, clearly alarmed, begged him to leave immediately, calling him an intruder and promising to handle him alone. Meanwhile, the older man kept his eyes fixed on the scene, trying to understand what was happening. With a slight smile, the young man in the suit addressed him with a calm greeting, saying it had been quite some time since they last saw each other. At that moment, a memory took shape. In the flashback, the young man appeared next to that same man, listening attentively as he spoke about the loyalists, evaluating a person, assuming that guy is strong as the ones he faced abroad. He wonders if those kinds of people are common in Korea. Also retreating, the bod. Inside a car, he revealed that his bodyguard, Hwansu, was also one of the loyalists. The other man, visibly flattered, responded that, compared to the others, he was still just beginning. He made it clear at that time that his only desire was to serve the young master as best as he could. The present came crashing back when the Hwansu's face, now in the restaurant, betrayed his emotion. Tears streamed down his face as he fell to his knees, the droplets on the floor marking his shock. He expressed a deep relief at seeing him alive and well. He finished, his voice breaking, respectfully calling him young Master Taea. In the background, the waiter watched the scene, astonished. The scene then changes to a quiet and orderly office, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Hanuo invited the young master inside, apologizing for the small space, but expressing how truly grateful he was to have him there. He then asked if the young master had attacked the Cheongu annex, praising him for doing what no one else dared, calling him remarkable as he casually tossed something. The young man admitted his failure, as Chongjin was still alive. After hanging up his coat, the older gentleman inquired about the young man from the bar, and the boy replied that he was his apprentice. He explained that he was currently working as a blacksmith in his spare time, and after 8 years, the apprentice was finally starting to look promising. The young master commented that the knife the apprentice was holding almost cut him, even without using any real technique, and he had never seen such a sharp blade before. Hanu said that was very kind of him, but he assumed that his past experiences had helped him a lot in that kind of work, while throwing something in the trash. He then remembered the abrupt entrance to the bar, with the young man jumping back. The protagonist declares that he would not like to meet him again. After a while, that same man arrives at the place where the protagonist had committed the massacre. While smoking, he calmly observes, while Hwansu scolded John Bin about leaving the lights on and the resulting electricity bill. Still in the office, Hanu asked with conviction if the young master had been the one who attacked the Cheongu annex. The boy noticed he'd thrown away the bill without even glancing at it and wondered why. As he unfolded the paper he'd picked up, he examined its contents with an expression of surprise. His eyes locked onto the paper, absorbing the information, just as a door mechanism clicked. Hanu said, "Anyway, young master." Hanu Geu, the former vice president of Cheongu's security, then asked what the young master had been doing all these years. After a pause, the young man replied somberly that he had been dedicated to execution, focusing entirely on the INT trash can overflowing with crumpled papers, including what appeared to be a bill. He then clarified that he had been busy killing those who betrayed his family, revealing a wanted poster featuring his photo and a large reward. 17 years earlier, a man was sitting alone in a dark room, waiting patiently. Suddenly, a door burst open with a bang, revealing the darkness on the other side. Another man entered, dragging a chair, and remarked that Honggu looked like he had seen better days. This man was Wohin, the eldest son of Chairman Cheongu of the Cheongu Group. He found it pathetic to see him in such a state. As Wohin mentioned that the funeral for his father, Suok, and his family had gone smoothly, Hansu slumped onto the table and continued, explaining that they had fabricated a story that Hansu wasn't on the yacht because he was caring for his ailing mother. Hansu abruptly stood up, enraged, and ordered the other man to be quiet, accusing him of being responsible for everything. He listed the firing of the caregiver and the disappearance of his mother, questioning if Wohin thought he wouldn't notice the scheme to keep him away. Calmly observes one of the bodies. Crouching down, the guy examines the corpses more closely, noting that they were all fatally stabbed by a blade with a length similar to that of, from the yacht. Wohin calmly responded that, regardless of what he said, the fact remained that he wasn't on the yacht, but there was evidence that Suyok had invited him. Then, Hwansu. He asked with a tense face if he had been mistaken about the other's intentions. Buhin said that he didn't want to blame him, understanding that family comes first. While making a small, he assured him that nothing would happen to him or his mother, and sliding over a notepad and pen, asked him to write. Then he leaned forward and asked who of the loyalists still remained. He knew that the group of loyalists was larger than those who had knelt at the door that day. Buhin insisted that he write, revealing to the others who would refuse to serve him, but Hwansu's gaze remained firm. Seeing the hesitation, Buhin turned to the other man in the room, Junsu, and asked whom he served. While Hwansu seemed to relent, he replied that Buhin already knew the answer, since he served only Cheongu, and only Cheongu. Sometime later, Hwansu, now older, asked a young master if he meant to say that he had become a murderer. The young man confirmed that he did indeed punish those who betrayed his family. Hanu, with a slight smile, surmised that he might be included in that category. After all, he had been absent instead of boarding the yacht with Master Suyok that day, and his hand clenched tightly. The young master brandished his weapon, stating that there were no excuses for traitors, and quickly prepared it. His gaze was intense and focused on the man in front of him. Hanu stepped forward, ready for whatever was coming. With a swift movement, he unleashed a powerful braided blow against the young man. The young man was surprised to see his blade shatter upon impact. Hanu smiled, remarking that it was a pity the young man's sword wasn't in better condition. A sashimi knife. Putting out his cigarette in the pool of blood, he grabs his phone and calls his contractor. His superior tells him that he had already told him not to call him at that hour. The man? State. The young man quickly removed his coat, preparing to fight without it. The coat flew through the air as he moved nimbly to the side. Hanu launched another quick blow, but the target was gone. The young man leaped at him with astonishing speed, leaving Hanu completely surprised. Looking up, Hanu had to admit that this was truly noticeable, even in the dim light. The young man's transition from using a weapon to hand-to-hand combat was seamless. His speed was incredible, making Hwansu wonder just how many fights he had been in. The young man's face displayed his complete focus on the battle. Hwansu, on the other hand, smiled enigmatically throughout the fight. He recalled a memory from the past, saying that Hwansu would gladly face the young master, no matter how many times he came after him, all while embracing him tightly. The scene shifted back to the room where Hanzo was now alone. He placed a bottle on the table, talking about the Salerno family, and saying that now he understood everything. He remembered that on that day, after the deaths of Master Suyok and the president on the yacht, a great manhunt began. Wohin eliminated all those loyal to the former president, but Hwangu was somehow spared. The young man inquired as to why, and Hwansu explained that he had simply been used as bait. At that time, Wohin was convinced that there were still loyalists within Cheongu, so he decided to forgive him, believing that other survivors would seek him out. But, after 17 years, it seemed as though everyone had forgotten him. He imagined the young master was wondering why, of all people, Ojin didn't choose him. Of all the loyal, of all the people who could have been used as bait, it was brother Junsu who interceded on his behalf on that occasion. The name Junsu caused the young master to reflect for a moment. However, suddenly, someone pulls him up. A man asks if Taea is okay. Seeing that the boy is still alive, the man asks him, crying, if he can move. He asks if the guy has a meeting later, informing him that the best option is to cancel the appointment. After all, the assassin who killed Director King could be after him. The young man said that on the day of the yacht incident, he received something from his grandfather while searching under the chair. He was supposed to hand it over to a director named Insukim, a lawyer. But like him, he also betrayed his family and was forced to take care of him. Then, Hwangu placed a fountain pen on the table, asking if Hansu recognized it, visibly surprised to see the object. Surprised to see the object, the young master persisted, asking who the remaining members of the loyalists group were. A memory of the old interrogation room emerged with Wojin. Questioning how much longer Hansu would maintain his loyalty, Wojin mentioned that even lawyer Chin had changed sides, saying that this loyalty was not great and that there was no one left to appreciate it. In the memory, Hansu hit his head hard against the table. Desperately, The sounds of his head hitting the table echoed as Wojin and Junsu observed him. At that moment, Junsu asked Hansu to stop that nonsense. Bloodied, Hansu asked if he should surrender, as Junsu did. As drops of blood fell to the ground, he shouted that Cheongu was the president's dream and the man who gave him an opportunity, asking how Junsu could even suggest betraying him. With tears and heavy, labored breathing, Hwanzu said that it was impossible. He would rather die than betray the president in such a way. The image then showed the scars on his head, a reminder of that day. Back in the present, Hwan commented that after 17 years, not many people would remember that fountain pen. However, he affirmed that as long as he lived, he would continue to fulfill the president's wishes. Then, Hanu asked the young teacher to become the next president of Cheongu. Director Mong Jiangu adjusted his glasses, stating that 3 of the 6 members, he was calmly drinking his wine and asks what is happening. His subordinate explains that he went to the security company and found them dead from their injuries. It appears to be, of the board of directors who support the vice president are at risk. They are served by department heads, each with at least 20 years of experience, but also by their superiors. Refusing to back down, tensions were rising. With those old stakeholders stubbornly refusing to retire, Director Chon Jin, who was also a board member, thought it was no wonder that the group was falling apart. He instructed his assistant to arrange a dinner with the department heads, figuring that after years of service, they must know some secrets about their superiors. A shoe softly tapped the floor as someone approached them. Chon Jin greeted the arriving director, saying it was a pleasure to see him. A group of older men were approaching, and one of them asked how he was doing that morning. Cheongu's vice president, Wan Yong, said he had a matter to discuss and asked for a moment of his time. Chon Jin responded with a smile, saying that he was quite busy, as they could see, and asked that everything be emailed to him later. He added, with a hint of sarcasm, that even though they were all old, surely someone among them, they would know how to draft an email. The vice president insisted that if he was busy, they would keep the discussion brief right there, his foot tapping the floor firmly. A woman in a suit, she stepped between them with her hands clasped in front of her. She apologized, but requested that the vice president refrain from approaching, as Mr. Bach had ordered that there be no clashes before the council meeting. Myeongeim observed that even if the vice president was the boss, he would still have to obey Mr. Bach's orders, since Cheongu's security, Gaeyu had aligned himself with Chonan. However, the vice president took another step forward, ignoring the warning. The woman, visibly nervous, said that if the vice president approached, it was a lone attack. Furthermore, the murderer is no ordinary person. It's very possible that he knows the exact location of the meeting. However, his superior says that a family reunion, any closer, she would have no other option. Her face showed apprehension as she hesitated, not completing her sentence. The vice president, with a furious look on his face, abruptly ordered her to move aside. His eyes conveyed a suppressed rage as he began to insult her, calling her a brat, his imposing presence leaving her visibly scared and looking up at him. Chung Jin appeared behind the vice president, interrupting the conversation. He questioned what kind of bodyguard trembled like that and informed the woman that he would dock her salary for 3 months. The bodyguard lowered her head, appearing to silently accept the reprimand. Mongi Chin reflected on the vice president's overwhelming presence, as imposing as that of Mr. Bach. He thought that Han Young was a small but powerful giant and understood why neither the founding president nor Guohin had managed to overthrow him. The vice president smiled slightly, looking at Chong Jin. He said that, on a personal level, he was very grateful to him, because since Chong Jin had eliminated not only the loyalist faction but also the Wohin faction, he was able to assume the presidency of Chong Ho after 37 years. He then mentioned the man for whom Chong Jin had offered a reward 3 days prior, the assailant behind the Jin family massacre, and who severed his Achilles tendon. With a wide smile, the vice president remarked that he had heard they wanted to kill him, but he was curious to hear his story if they managed to capture him alive. Chong Jin responded that he had already found him and sent someone to collect the 20 billion won reward, giving the vice president an ultimatum: resign or die. He then turned to leave, leaving the vice president behind. The vice president laughed derisively, repeating, 37 years. The scene shifted to the front of a pub. In cases of emergency, is a custom of the Cheongu Group, and he asks if his subordinate really believes that someone would invade a meeting that only family members know about, called Freslier Poop. Inside, Huanu looked surprised and asked the young master if he wanted him to craft a leaf. The young master ideally requested a blade so sturdy that it could withstand anything, without ever breaking, and asked if such a thing was even possible. A chef at the counter chimed in, saying it was all because the young man's knife had almost broken Hanggu, and then boasted that he could now make blades. Excellent. Hanu rebuked the chef, telling him not to think he was special just for knowing how to sharpen metal, and to concentrate on cutting fish correctly, reminding him that mackerel should be filleted against the grain. Turning to the young master, Hanu inquired if the order was for his brother, Junsu. The young man confirmed, explaining that Junsu had managed to break his knife with his bare hands. After all, he admitted that although he had witnessed many things in his line of work, this was the first time he had ever seen something like that. Hanggu remarked that using the name of the young man's father as a proxy for the upcoming council meeting was a brilliant move that undoubtedly caused a stir within the board of directors. Master Taea commented that if Han Uyong were things as they once were, he would reprimand Chongjin, whose greed was so immense that even his grandfather struggled to keep it in check. Wano added that if Taea were to successfully enter the council meeting amidst that turbulent power struggle, his very existence could be a game-changer, serving as living testimony. Advice amidst that turbulent power struggle, his mere existence would be a game-changer, acting as a testament. That would serve as proof of Chongjin's despicable actions and coup d'état, Chongjin, thus depriving him of the chance to gain a seat on the council or lay claim to the presidency. The young master's gloved hand stretched out across the table as he confirmed that was indeed the plan. However, he stated that regardless of how things played out, he needed to confront Junsubak, the man who commands the security forces of, stating that he sent him to discreetly hunt down that man, and then he gets lost in his thoughts. The guy notices that the wounds from that knife remind him of something, recalling the Chonggeo. Hanu thoughtfully poured himself a drink, took a sip, and then asked the young master if, upon facing him again, he believed he would be victorious. Taea responded that, frankly, it wasn't a question of victory, but a duty he had to fulfill. With a grim expression, he declared that every last traitor who had hurt and betrayed his family would die by his hands, without exception. The chef behind the bar listened to the conversation in silence. Master Tae added that, honestly, it wasn't as if it were the first time he had faced a monster of that caliber. Hanggu slammed his chopsticks on the table with satisfaction, and promised that, as a member of the loyalist faction, he would forge a blade so remarkable that even his brother Junsu would be left speechless. The young master gave his thanks, stood up, and said that he would stay elsewhere for now, requesting to be contacted when it was ready. The bell above the door rang as he exited the pub and stepped onto the street. Someone was watching from afar and said, "Oh, great, there he is." As Taea walked down the sidewalk, she paused for a moment, as if sensing something strange. A man wearing a cap approached, saying that he was the one with the 20 billion own bounty, and he was told he had to go with them. Taea wondered if he was a bounty hunter, surprised that not even a day had passed since the reward announcement. He began to ask who told them where he would be, but he was interrupted by a quick movement and a whooshing sound. Suddenly, he was struck hard by an attack from above, throwing him to the ground and causing a huge crash. The impact was so strong that it reverberated through the street with multiple explosions. The assassin duo, Batide and Lanzador, regretted launching the victim outside, since they needed him alive. Batide responded that it wasn't his blow that sent him flying. He explained that Taea threw herself to offset the force that her body, protagonist asking him for a cigarette, and his hands when taking the cigarette, stating that if he doesn't use knives, there's no way he could have gotten all those scars on his palms. With that in mind, Wim asks, would absorb, as the dust from the impact began to settle. Back at the pub, Hanggu heard the noise outside and asked what that sound was, looking worried. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain shot through him, and he shouted, "Young master," realizing he had been stabbed. The tip of a blade appeared near his glasses, embedded in his head. Chongjin smiled mischievously, and, he asked, 37 years? So what? He went on to say that it wasn't about how long it took, but about tenacity. Old Huansu, injured, was holding the chef from behind, his neck creaking, and asked if Chongjin knew how much preparation had been done and who he had placed for each scenario. He cited the greatest murderer, who pretended to be a fool for years to fight for the honor of succeeding Junsubak, with a sinister gleam in his eyes. Hanu, still holding the hostage, asked in shock what Chongjin had just done. Chongjin just smiled, revealing that he had poisoned the blade with Suruku toxin. He claimed that it wouldn't be lethal, but the pain would be so intense that Huansu would wish he were dead, so it was best to stay still. The ground. Stunned, Huan stammered, as he realized something terrible about his attacker. Chongjin then mentioned the vice president of Cheongu's Special Operations Division, asking if the name sounded familiar. He explained that this was the unofficial unit created by Jun Subak to mold a worthy successor. In the end, Dog Yongan was chosen, and the Arfai, others were supposedly eliminated. However, Chong Hin considered discarding such talent a waste, because in a country with a shortage of natural resources, it was essential to take maximum advantage of the people. With that, he made his final proposal, that the vice president resign, promising him peace until the end of his days. Otherwise, he would have to find someone strong enough. His superior scoffs, asking if anyone in his family is skilled with knives, and then laughs, saying those people can barely cut an apple. Also, everyone is present, except for the children, so, to confront Jun Subak, also known as Nameless. He is the number 4 member of the division. Chonggeu observed that although they had known each other for a long time, it was the first time they had met like this. They truly faced off. With a swift motion, the chef hurled Huanggu across the restaurant. With a trembling hand, Huanggu identified the poison, Suruku, a viper renowned for its potent effect, neurotoxic, and he wondered if Chonggeu had truly sent him to monitor him after he left, and if that man had been by his side all those years in disguise. The redhead confirmed that he was placed there indefinitely, with a condition to end his surveillance. In order for him to leave, he needed to. Before he could finish, Huanggu, consumed by fury, charged forward with a scream. The objective was to locate the last remaining loyal members. The attacker swiftly reacted and slashed him with the blade. Confused, Huanggu couldn't understand how the enemy had moved so quickly, as he had been right in front of him just seconds before. Before he could react, he was struck again, this time caught off guard and defenseless, showing no. Remorsefully, the attacker remarked that he didn't want to strike him twice in the same manner, but he shrugged, as if it made no difference. Then, with a grim smile, he announced that it was time to go after the young master's head. Outside, a roar and an explosion shattered the tranquility of the day. One of the bounty hunters, known as Lanzador, he shouted that there were no eliminations and no runners on base, launching steel balls at high speed. Running with agility, the young master dodged the explosions caused by the projectiles. It was hard to believe that someone could throw with such precision and strength. It wasn't impossible to escape, but it required extreme effort. Meanwhile, the batsman was preparing to. He offers him an additional 100,000 won for women to guard the place and ensure its security. Upon leaving the office, the guy says he will attend the meeting, but still requests increased security. Hit one of the metal spheres with his bat. With a shout of home run on the way, he struck the ball with enormous force. Coming at high speed, the projectile almost hit him. The real threat was the coordinated, successive attacks. He thought that if he had a knife in his hand, he might have finished all of this already. Seeing Tae dodge, the batter remarked that the 20 billion reward made sense, as only someone in Ocean's top 10 could avoid his attack. Approaching him, the pitcher suggested that Tae surrender, while things were still reasonable, promising to spare his life. With irony, the young man replied that it was an admirably kind offer, considering the aggressive way he'd been using the bat from the start. Laughing, batter questioned whether his opponent really believed a polite request would be enough while they were both moving forward. He added that for players like them, actions spoke louder than words. If they wanted to be heard, they should knock him down first. Finally, the pitcher revealed that some had hired them to capture him alive, and others to kill him. In either case, they would be paid, but perhaps Taea would rather be taken alive. The young master looked at the Sabuska wanted poster, wondering if they really wanted him alive and if those men weren't connected to Chongjin. At that instant, the red-haired assassin silently appeared behind him, ready to launch a surprise attack. With an agile movement, the young man managed to dodge the swift blow. Surprised by the dodge, the assassin spun the weapon in the air as if to better evaluate his adversary. The hunter's reaction was immediate. Irritated, the thug shouted, asking who the hell that was and how dare he interfere with their merchandise. Without showing fear, the young man turned around and questioned the newcomer's identity, smiling wryly. The red-haired, annoyed, his boss says he understands and hands his cell phone to another employee. The man says that this crazy guy is nothing more than a gangster and still thinks he can give him orders. While walking through the Bartine, man responded that he hoped he would recognize him, declaring himself to be the assassin sent to kill him. The hunter muttered, mockingly, saying that another disgusting cockroach had determined to appear. Hearing that, the batter sighed, stating there was no other choice. Now, they would have to deal with both of them. Without wasting any time, the pitcher began his wind-up again. Eliminations, runner on first. He wound up, preparing another pitch. But before the motion was completed, the assassin precisely sliced his arm, mocking his baseball talk. About baseball. Screaming in pain, the pitcher contemptuously grabbed his wounded arm. The assassin ordered him to disappear, calling him a cockroach. Staggering, the man fell, screaming, as the batter watched in shock. Calling him by his name, filled with rage, the batter raised his bat over his head, shouting insults at the aggressor. But with a swift and precise strike, he was hit squarely by the assassin. Losing patience, he ordered him to shut up, calling him a bloated larva. He said he was still in a good mood, so he ordered the other one to stop screaming and disappear. As his companion's body fell, the young man approached, carefully observing the scene. It was then that he recognized the clothing and realized, confused, that it was the PP apprentice. He asked if he had been disguised and demanded to know what had happened to his mentor. The assassin laughed, saying that his mentor was probably already dead, since a single dose of the poison usually led to most people's graves, and he had received 2. The young man's hand clenched tightly upon hearing that. He wanted to know if the assassin was acting under orders from Cheongjin, and if he had been sent to track down the last loyalists. With a gesture, the assassin confirmed, adding that he would have rotted on that mission, but the young man's arrival had saved him from that miserable fate. Mocking the loyalist faction corridors, he composes himself and prepares for the meeting. Upon arrival, he greets his boss and asks when the president arrived. Speaking on the phone, Women informs his gang leader that he plans to help. He called them an illusory enemy, explaining that he had patiently endured everything in search of a single opportunity, and now that opportunity was before him, to kill Dogongan and take Junsubak's place. The traitor said that as he launched his attack, the young master faced the onslaught with a firm and determined expression. At the same time, a memory surfaced, the vice president alone in the office, deep in thought. In the memory, Cheongjin smiled, challenging him to find someone capable of facing Junsubak. The vice president, still in the memory, smiled contemptuously, regarding Cheongjin as a fool whose naivety knew no bounds. He doubted Cheongjin would place someone powerful enough right under his nose, without him noticing. He considered that impossible, and concluded then that Junsubak was pretending to ignore it on purpose, considering the act so pathetic that it didn't even warrant a response, since after all, Cheongjin was the second in command. Back to the present, the young master's eyes narrowed, fixated on the approaching opponent. The assassin's jump, teeth clenched, was reflected in his dilated pupils. Yet, with surprising calm, he called out to Hanzu and asked for a knife. From inside the pub, the wounded Hanzu launched himself through the window, which shattered into splinters. Although covered in blood, he still managed to help one last time, holding the remaining knives. The assassin crashed into the protagonist's ally, the impact destroying him. A large explosion of smoke and debris filled the street where he fell. Quickly, the young master grabbed 2 of the knives that Hanzu had thrown, one in each hand. Badly wounded, Hanzu muttered a few words under his breath. The boy responded that he understood and asked him to rest a little. With one last effort, Hanzu fell to the ground, motionless. The opponent emerged from the shadows, leaping towards him with a smile. He scoffed, saying that it was not the time for extremely happy to see that his grandfather is still there. Soko says that it seems the heavens haven't completely abandoned them yet. The protagonist warns him that his parents are underneath the Cheongu Group for one more day before returning. However, they call him a traitor, but instead of getting angry, he asks if his boss has been drinking. He reports that they offered him another 100,000 won there. Distractions. With a swift blow, he launched the young man across the street, causing him to crash down hard. Sitting on the ground, he recovered from the impact. Wiping the dust from his clothes, he commented that the loyalists were truly incredible. Huanzu received enough poison to kill most people, yet he couldn't believe how quickly Huanzu responded to the call for a knife. The enemy. He asked if he was jealous, implying that Hansu had treated him better all those years. He denied it, by stepping on and breaking one of the fallen knives, saying only that it was surprising to see him still standing. The ground beneath his feet cracked from the force he exerted. He continued, stating that it didn't matter because Huanzu would be dead soon anyway. As a light pole of light fell in his direction, he looked up, surprised to see the enemy had knocked the object down. The pole fell with a crash, destroying part of the street and the facade of a building. Severed electrical wires sparked and crackled on the ground, one of them whipping dangerously close to him. The nearby traffic lights began to flash erratically, irregular. People were shouting and asking what was happening and who was causing such destruction. Again, wielding a large knife, the killer asked if he was good enough for the TP. Approaching quickly, the two faced each other amidst the sparking cables, their blades clashing with metallic sounds. The enemy commented that, according to Cheongjin, the young master didn't even even managed to land a hit on Junsubak before fleeing. Still, he blatantly wanted to return to face them, questioning the source of such confidence. One of the cables was still, releasing sparks nearby. To escape the energized cable, he jumped to the roof of a building. He was closely followed by his adversary, who mocked his pathetic weakness. With a powerful, millions for the job, insisting only an idiot would turn it down. Furthermore, there seems to be a dangerous killer at large. However, he notices the protagonist hiding in the reading. Powerful blow. He threw him against the side of a building, causing a deafening crash. He slid across the floor of the dark hallway, acknowledging the strength of his opponent. He prepared for the next attack, he was approaching rapidly from behind. Their blades clashed repeatedly, creating sparks that illuminated the darkness. He felt like he couldn't understand this enemy. It was as if he were constantly teleporting. He took a step forward with incredible speed. However, the attacks themselves were slow enough to be countered. He remembered how the assassin had acted in disguise for years, fooling even him with his feigned incompetence. Furthermore, he wielded a sharp blade, so why resort to poison? He gripped the knives, ready to act again, and asked the enemy if he had any idea what it truly meant to be a hitman. In a flashback, he questioned someone with their feet propped up on a table if they were talking about assassins. The person explained that many people think they are the same, but they are not. The difference is that one is hired for the job. He stated that in assassinations, it's better to rely on science, explosives, poison, drones, the options. They are limitless. Moreover, hiring that kind of service would be incredibly expensive. He also mentioned that assassins not only eliminate the target, but they also ensure that no trace remains. He commented that this seemed to be his usual way of doing things, but he was reprimanded, hearing that his methods were a complete disaster. Who in their right mind would paint a wall with blood? He then deduced that the recent mission was a trap. The person confirmed. The client wanted both the target dead and him eliminated, a common government tactic to kill two birds with one stone, but posed a question. What if there was someone who always eliminated targets without leaving a trace? What would happen to the organization that possessed such an individual? The idea worried him. With a bot, Ali. Quickly, Women wraps things up, saying he'll explain the details later. Looking at the boy, trying to act nonchalant, he asks if a cigarette wasn't enough. Taea replies that, assassin like that, they would wield tremendous power. Returning to the fight, he thought that if this man was truly an assassin, everything made sense. His movements were unlike a ordinary speed, but rather seemed like a magician disappearing and appearing with a purpose. If he purposely knocked down the pole to carry it there into the darkness, that was a plan, not a coincidence. The murderer smiled, repeating that he was saved from that miserable fate. He smiled back, understanding why Chongjin and Junsubak had left him to rot. For years, they wanted to create a killer, but with his chaotic way of acting as a killer, they gave up on him. The enemy's eyes widened in rage at those words. In another memory, a young man, in a tracksuit, the murderer was reprimanded. He was hit and fell to the floor of a gym. He begged to continue, saying he still wanted to fight. Junsubak refused, stating that he had seen enough, and that he was disappointed. He said he had to focus on his strengths, and that it was frustrating to see him get distracted by the unattainable. Dogongan, with a cold expression, declared that he never would become someone just like him. The young man yelled at him to shut up, demanding to know what he even knew. In the present, the rival was branded a coward and abandoned, having fled with his tail between his legs, and was questioned about who he thought he was to speak to them in that manner. Furious, the assassin shouted for them to remember his words, promising to bring back their heads and make everyone acknowledge him once more. Time. As he advanced, a blade sliced through the air with incredible speed. He ran down a dark hallway, resolute. Suddenly, he realized something was amiss and demanded they wait. A gloved hand, he pressed the elevator button to close the doors. He was told that he had been given plenty of opportunities already, but he simply couldn't see what he was fighting against. With a determined, finding someone of that caliber near the scene isn't a coincidence, and that following him was a good idea. Smiling, the man says, "It's been a great day." First, he was determined, the young master declared. "Now it's my turn. Hello everyone, did you enjoy the story? I certainly did. If you want to see the next part, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next story." Asked for a cigarette, then followed, saying he can't believe he didn't notice, admitting it was the first time something like this had happened to him. Approaching him, the protagonist says that before they start, he'd like to ask a question, inquiring if the guy is working with the Cheongu Group. On the other hand, Women asks if he wasn't listening to their conversation, saying that only is temporarily helping. With that, the boy gives him a deathly glare, pulling 2 daggers from his back. He swiftly clashes his blade against the enemy's weapon. They both stare at each other, assessing the ability of the other. Thus begins a frantic exchange of blows. However, Women leaps above the protagonist, brandishing his weapon to deliver a strike. To his surprise, his bat is sliced into several pieces. Seeing that, the gangster wonders when this happened. Furthermore, Taea had disappeared in the blink of an eye, but his opponent becomes nervous upon realizing something. The positions had been reversed, and now the protagonist was the one in the air, quickly preparing to end the battle. With them, but his grandfather says he knows. However, there is nothing they can do. He asks his grandson to never forget the words he will say at that moment, stating that no matter how, Women admits that the Cheongu got into big trouble this time, wondering how they became the target of such a monster. Taea falls toward her opponent, while wielding their blades. The gangster is at a loss, now that he's disarmed. The protagonist lands a blow, knocking the man to the ground, and prepares to leave. While wiping the excess blood from his knife, he heads towards the alley exit, leaving Wim's body lying there. However, to his surprise, the guy asks if the boy is kidding. Still wounded, he hadn't died yet, and asks if, even after all that, the protagonist is really just going to leave like this, stating that he'll regret letting him live. Sheathing his dagger, Taea explains that he has his own principles, warning him that if he were with the Cheongu Group, he would be dead already. He tells him to stay out of his way, or next time, if he hears him helping his enemies, he won't be so lenient. Furthermore, if he can't accept being spared, he can just consider it payback for the cigarette. Still lying on, Wim smiles on the ground, realizing that a simple cigarette saved his life, admitting that he narrowly escaped this time. A little later, a car speeds through the streets. Obviously, the protagonist was the driver, and for some reason, he seemed irritated and in pain. Seeing a wound around his waist, Taea says that at least the blow wasn't deep. While driving, he says that at least he can still move, hurrying even more because he only needs 32 minutes. He says his revenge, planned for 17 years, will finally bear fruit, with only 32 minutes left. Minutes to the conclusion. Again, the boy is flooded with memories from his childhood. His mother was begging him not to look, while his father used his body to shield them both from the child grows up. He must inherit the Cheongu Group. With that, the old man hands Taea a pen, and informs him that by taking it to Attorney Kim, the man will automatically know how to help him. Besides, shots. However, extremely scared and worried, he runs toward his father. The man asks what he is doing, and tells his wife to grab the child and run away. Thus, his mother takes Taea so they can try to escape, but the ship starts moving erratically. Even the assassins struggle to keep their balance. His mother puts the boy outside the door. She tells her son to find a life jacket and jump into the water. With a smile, Widgeon says that he needs to survive. One of the men says, "That's annoying," and warns that he had said to detonate the bombs after eliminating everyone. Looking in their direction, the protagonist is surprised, since the assassins can speak Korean. The guy's face was completely covered by a mask and goggles as he pointed at him and his mother. Widgeon becomes desperate and yells at Taea to run as fast as he can. The boy starts running desperately through the boat. Besides being scared, the boy was terrified. He ran, panting and crying uncontrollably. Due to the previous explosion, part of the yacht was already on fire, but then, another bomb detonates, causing the ship to sink even faster. Returning to the present, we find ourselves in the secret annex of Ganpuk, the SEO of the Cheongu Group department store. Gayu asks if they have truly found the person who killed Director Kim. However, Hasa suggests it was likely a crime of passion, considering the director secretly had 2 lovers. His sister remarks that it's quite disgusting. However, the man replies that it's ironic coming from someone who is having multiple affairs. John Mon then asks about the director's involvement. Kim brings up the company's share allocation, stating that they will have to announce it soon, but suddenly, someone slams their hand on the table, drawing everyone's attention to him. The man? He must remember not to trust anyone and return to Korea as quickly as possible to meet the lawyer. Still, the protagonist asks his grandfather to at least save his father and mother, orders everyone to be quiet, or rather, directs his son to speak. Chan states that 2 employees were found at the scene. However, they didn't have much to say and were dismissed. Furthermore, it was confirmed that there were other witnesses present. The man said they were just subcontractors, so they don't know much in general, other than that the police assured them the incident wouldn't be leaked. Suddenly, his father throws a glass of wine at his head. Everyone at the table was left not understanding what had just happened. The old man asks, Where is the Ocean gang? Cheon was visibly irritated. Because of that. Still, the man smiles, saying they don't seem to know anything, even after sending Wimming, the seventh in command. However, the madman breaks a bottle over his son's head. Old man says that in 24 hours, he hasn't even found out who the killer is or where they are, and instead, he reported on a gang. He says that if the former president and Suyok hadn't died 17 years ago, someone as incompetent as him would never have set foot in that position. In addition to the wine, the man's face was completely covered in blood. Regardless of what happened, Cheon assures him that, "You will find it in the next 12 hours. The rest of the family notices that neither of them has changed, which bothers everyone. Jui asks why he is so strict with the eldest. After all, he is still his eldest son. However, his brother says it's not out of hate, stating that it's definitely out of fear. Taking a cloth, Cheon asks his subordinate to hand him the cell phone as he wipes his face, searching for something on his phone. He asks where his men are. His assistant informs him that they are ready. The madman says that's exciting, and adds that he's eager to see how big this entrance will be. On a road at night, the protagonist continued toward his objective. Tae admits that he has been watching the Cheongu Group for the past 17 years, since the day he was accepted by the processed mother. The man starts taking off his vest, and the child is unsure what he intends to do with it. Surprisingly, the old man puts the vest on the boy while explaining, Salerno family. Even before his grandfather Ho's funeral, he became the new president, taking over all the shares and assuming his position, taking advantage of the disorder of the war, failed in their fight against crime, and instead allied with factions like the Ocean gang to increase their power. Even though this marked the beginning of the Cheongu era, they still held meetings with the members during those times. Moments. That was an old family tradition that dated back to his grandfather's time. Neither the system nor the traditions had changed. Everyone killed to reach their positions within the hierarchy created by Syoko, even being willing to murder their own parents and him. One of the guards was monitoring the security cameras, wondering about the car that was approaching. He then asks his superior if the members are expecting any guests, but his superior denies it. He heads towards the front gates. Furthermore, the car doesn't seem to be slowing down, leading him to believe it's probably some crazy guy. The head of security orders the security pillars to be raised. With that, containment stakes begin to emerge from the ground. However, the protagonist accelerates even further. After all, he doesn't need tricks up his sleeve to take down people who have been protected their entire lives. Taking off his belt, Tae says no. There's no point in creating elaborate plans. His car is completely destroyed in the front from the impact. Still, he jumps out with his blade in hand, stating that the only thing he hopes is that they haven't forgotten their family, so he can tell everyone to their faces. The guards look at the intruder, scared. The boy quickly finishes them all off in a single attack and declares that he is back. Confused, they ask what that loud noise was, questioning why it's getting louder and louder. Plus, it seems to be coming from the front gate, unlike that they were both shot dead before the ship sank. Inflating the vest, Soko tells Taea to stay away and survive at all costs. With that, the man pushes his grandson. The others, Cheon, seem to be confused, but confident. His uncle orders the guy to go over there and check out what all the commotion is about. However, to John Won's surprise, he says there's no need for that. All the guards inside the hall aim their weapons at the family members. The eldest sister asks, "What's going on?" Irritated, he asks if they really want to be playing around at a time like this. However, his son calmly stands up while wiping his mouth. The old man asks if he's really going to go through with it, is going to do that. With a smile, John states that his father already expected that to happen sooner or later. That was the reason why his father was always angry with him, as he feared that he would end up just like his grandfather. With a terrifying face, the madman says that, after all, he was the one who killed his grandfather and his uncle. On the other hand, the protagonist was passing through the gates, saying that his revenge would finally begin. The guards point their weapons, questioning if this is some kind of ambush. Ja-seong asks if his nephew has gone crazy. They question that. He's attacking that guy, insisting that he should never point a gun at his family. However, Cheon maintains that he isn't doing anything. Despite this, they continue to insult him, saying that they understood what he meant. Jui, looking at one of the guards, asks if he's really going to betray them for that little brat. Even though he was her personal bodyguard, John Min apologizes, showing that he is abandoning her. Even the second son's bodyguard says that it's nothing personal, but the rewards for this betrayal are simply too irresistible. On the other hand, one of them comments that if they had at least received a raise, this wouldn't be happening. The only person who remains silent is Cheon's own bodyguard. The father away, as another giant wave approaches. The storm raged, with lightning constantly flashing through the clouds. After a while, all the chaos transformed into a peaceful. The boy says he understands the others betraying him, but he doesn't understand why his own son did that. He asks if his bodyguard will really turn his back on him. He watches without moving or uttering a word. The man states he isn't paid to protect him, but rather the Cheongu Group. Jong questions whether the guards truly believe they stand a chance of winning. Doing that, he attempts to continue threatening them, but a gun is suddenly pointed at his head. His own bodyguard executes him in cold blood. With that, the two remaining brothers panic, and they plead for mercy. However, gunshots reverberate throughout the hall as blood splatters. Che hands the handkerchief to his subordinate, calmly walking towards his father, the old man. He admits that he had always anticipated something like this happening eventually, ever since the day his other son passed away from acute leukemia, and shortly after, his wife filed for divorce, refusing even a single penny. Trembling with rage, he says that he had always suspected Cheon was behind everything, which is why he always kept his distance. As he turns the gun, the boy remarks that, for someone who ordered his father's assassination and brother, he talks too much while having the gun pointed at his head. The man asks the old man who ordered his own father and brother to be cast out to sea, asking him what other choice he had, because if he hadn't, would have killed everyone. Suok's son would have inherited the presidency, and they wouldn't have gotten this far. The psychopath approaches and asks why his father didn't declare him as his future successor. The old man is becoming increasingly terrified by everything. Furthermore, his son was looking at him with a terrifying expression, while stating that if he had, he would have killed him sooner. He doesn't deny that he would have killed him before, but says he is a little annoyed. Upon hearing this, his father assures him that even if he kills him right there, he will never become president. But Cheon, incredibly agonizing situation. The boy was still floating on the water, opening his eyes, clearly exhausted. The child is left without a reaction when he notices something casting a shadow in the middle of that. Interrupts, saying that he already knows that. After all, transfers of power through political or violent coups are not recognized. That is a clause established by the committee. With that, the boy says it's a disgrace and informs them that the person making noise outside is not one of them. The president, while shooting his father, asks who it could be, and explains that it is a young master who waited 17 long years for that day. The guards fired at the intruder and attempted to surround him, as the assassin was unarmed. The protagonist remembers that the Central Security Force is composed of the people who protect the executive members, which is why they hold high positions, so he assumes that the bodyguards will be much stronger than the previous ones. He pauses for a moment, changing the direction he's moving. The boy claims that this won't be a problem, and, therefore, heads towards the enemies in a zigzag pattern in order to dodge the shots, using one of the guards' bodies as a shield. Desperately, the man begs them not to shoot, as he would be hit. However, the guards don't care. They barge in and immediately open fire, leaving one of the guards terrified as his weapon is sliced in half. In an instant, Taea swiftly defeats them all. The leader demands that the president be evacuated as quickly as possible. However, the protagonist throws his dagger at him, but a guard manages to intercept the knife. A bespectacled man inquires about the commotion, questioning whether they couldn't do that more quietly. 3 department heads appear, attempting to subdue him, but that small group is completely ignored as the protagonist eliminates the others. One of them claims he can handle it alone and instructs his companions to wait. However, despite his immense strength, Taea was still suffering from the earlier wound. He trained until he reached the assassin's maximum speed, and then returned seeking revenge. The story begins with someone saying they never imagined it would take 17 years to return to Korea. Sunny sky. The source of the shadow was a large cargo ship passing by. A person smiles, though their face is obscured by the light. Taea was very scared and confused after. With each passing minute, the wound seemed to worsen. Regaining his focus, he realizes his enemy's fist is already dangerously close to his face, leaving him with no choice but to block the blow. While being thrown backward, he manages to regain some balance, but unexpectedly, a shadow looms over him. The man demands to know how he dared to attack that place and also be distracted while invading his territory. However, the protagonist nods and says that now is not the time to be distracted by injuries, and he slashes at the center of the man's chest. Of the man, startling his companions who witnessed the sudden defeat. Quickly, Taea throws her other dagger at the remaining 2, who were no longer as confident as they had been. Surprisingly, the intruder had already landed a blow on the man who was defending against his ranged attacks. Chulo could barely keep up with him. Taking one of the knives he had thrown, the critically rough Protagonist slices off the head of the last department head. With that, he had defeated all the guards outside. As he walks toward the entrance, he spots his second dagger and picks it up, calmly, as if he were the only one there. While cleaning up the excess blood, he figures it took longer than he thought. Even so, the place is strangely silent, and he wonders if they managed to escape through some secret passage he didn't know about. Unaware of what awaits him, the boy starts walking through the house, eventually arriving in the living room where everyone was dead, and only Factor Saces. Chan remained seated in the middle of the blood, welcoming him. She also congratulated him for having made it this far, asking if he wanted to sit down and catch his breath a little to rest. Seeing all of this, even the protagonist didn't really understand what was happening. He observed Hasong's body with a bullet wound in the forehead, as well as his aunt Hui's, having been rescued. Two rifle-armed guards are surprised to find the boy still alive. One of them starts yelling for their boss, announcing that the boy is okay. Upon hearing that, even Jong W. had suffered the same fate. The current president was also dead. Getting up, his cousin says that he feels better than he imagined, claiming that the assassins of today, they should take better care of themselves. Greeting him formally, Chon asks if he recognizes him. However, the protagonist only says the man's name and mentions that he is Go's son, Go's eldest son. The madman says he doesn't remember them being close enough for him to call his father by his first name. Distrustful, Taea only observes this abnormal behavior of his. Cousin says that he waited for him there because it seemed disrespectful not to greet him, and also because he needs to explain some things to him, informing him that if he doesn't want to sit down, they can remain standing, foot, since it won't take much time anyway. Chan asks if the boy remembers that day, 17 years ago, the day he was rescued by the Italian Mafia. Interrupting his speech, his bodyguard informs him that the helicopter is ready, claiming that they must leave soon because it is very dangerous there. Annoyed, the man tells him that he had asked him to call him only later, to finish speaking. However, Taea is suddenly surprised by something, clearly showing that he was not expecting it, and says that he recognizes that voice, the voice of the one who killed his family 17 years ago. Years ago, remembering the man who pointed the rifle at him and his mother, the person who complained about the premature explosions while laughing from behind his mask. Extremely furious, Taea, he asks if he was that worm. The madman starts trying to contain his laughter, stating that he doesn't have much to say, and orders the protagonist to stop speaking to him so casually, since that is making him want to kill him. Moving on, he tells the guy to try it, since his goal from the beginning was to wipe out the entire family. But his cousin starts to say that there's a saying, a language different from his. The protagonist realizes that they are both Italian. The man kept trying to contact his employer. It seems someone overheard that call, which states that when in Korea, one should act like a Korean, telling him to change his tone. Irritated, Taea begins to try to understand the situation correctly, realizing that Chan knows that he survived 17 years ago, and also knows he is an Salerno murderer, wondering why he waited until his return, 17 years after the incident, to launch an attack, trying to catch the boy's attention. The guy asks him to really listen, saying that it's about to begin. Only then does Tae understand that, in reality, this madman doesn't want to attack, but to blame him for the attack, claiming that he led it, thus being able to successfully take over the presidency. Jun Yok tells the young master that they need no introduction. The protagonist simply places his dagger in front of him. The bodyguard starts shooting at the boy. However, the assassin manages to defend himself against all the shots, using his blade to deflect the path of the projectiles, quickly closing the distance between the two. However, another of the guards lands a strong blow on the boy. Although he knew more were coming, he couldn't foresee that particular attack. Unlike the other one, the man introduces himself as Juno Park, preventing himself from being cornered. The young master quickly retreats, stopping in front of his adversaries, without losing. Wasting no time, Juno starts shooting at him again, admitting that he's faster than the rumors suggested, and that he would dominate the world of athletics if he were a professional. His partner prevents the protagonist from escaping. Even he is getting a little nervous about the situation. Juno asks if flexibility is the secret to the young master's success, and quickly launches a sequence of frenzied attacks. Tae notices that they are strong, completely different from the ones he faced outside. However, if it weren't for that injury, he could face him without any problems. Noticing that Chan seems to, while one of them complains about their boss being back in that place, the chubby one asks if the boy can understand him. However, Tae notices the distinctive tattoo on the man's neck have lowered his guard, and that maybe this is their only opportunity before the bodyguard arrives. Furthermore, if the woman beside him is Dane, there are 3 guards in the place, but there were 4 members at the meeting. Unexpectedly, his thoughts are interrupted as Juno prepares to attack him. Thanks to the reflection in her opponent's pupil, Taea manages to identify the fourth guard. Jongmin, armed with a sword, was preparing to attack him from behind. To both of their surprise, he disappears between them, leaving them unable to understand how it's possible. Kneeling on the ground, the protagonist realizes that this must be the last one. The guy complains about being mirrored, blaming Juno, but his partner retorts that if it were easy, the boy would be dead already. Reloading her weapons, Juno says she can barely imagine the reward they'll receive if they kill that guy. In this way, both she and the guard with glasses use their weapons to shoot at the assassin. Seeing the situation, Chong comments aloud that it's difficult to keep up with a fight that involves both ranged and hand-to-hand combat, warning that they were trained with the purpose of defeating him due to rumors circulating through Interpol about his inhuman speed, even admitting that he considered killing him with a bomb. But the story that he died in combat would bring him even more fame. Juno positions herself in front of the boy, intending to prevent his escape. Junhyuk says that no matter how fast he is, it will all end, now that Tae has been cornered. With that, the guard uses his brass knuckles to try and land a blow. The protagonist didn't have much he could do, only observing the attack coming towards him. His cousin thanks him for the show, while smiling malevolently. After receiving the blow from the enemy, he is pressed against the wall, causing it to crack completely, going back, man. Thus, the protagonist understands that, with that tattoo and the weapons, the people on that ship are not ordinary. Suddenly, the group's leader jumps down from where she was, startling him. The woman lands in front of the years ago. Regina was scolding him and asking what it was all about, stating that she had ordered him to take care of the traitor, not to use him as paint to decorate the walls. She even started vomiting. Seeing that scene of them still arguing, the woman points out that with his speed, he could have done it silently, reminding him of the day they saved him. She says she understands his anger, but Lorenzo always treated him well, but killing someone like that will only provoke them to seek revenge. Therefore, as his mentor and spokesperson for the Salerno family, Regina asks the boy to never do something like that again. However, the protagonist didn't seem happy or remorseful. Still, he says that this way, people will never know. Confused, she asks what Taea is talking about. He explains that if they kill traitors silently, their deaths won't serve as an example, stating that everyone needs to know what awaits them if they betray the family. Rumors must spread in an exaggerated and distorted way, thus decreasing the number of traitors each time. Otherwise, it will always be an endless struggle. The woman asks if he chose the path of violent deaths to prevent even greater bloodshed. Except for the ground where he stood, everything around him was stained with blood. She says it's absurd that such a statement would come from a boy standing in a river of blood without a single drop on his face. Interrupting her own thoughts, Regina comments that, apparently, being a murderer doesn't really suit him. Returning to the present, Juno freezes as a light emanates from the center of her chest. The man starts spitting blood as that glow continues to emanate outwards. Even Chon and his bodyguard are surprised by this. The protagonist had brutally slashed the man, directing a menacing glare at his other boy, demanding to know how he got onto their ship. Her subordinate points out that the boy might not speak their language. Annoyed, she orders them to bring someone who can help them communicate. Tae just adversaries. Frightened, Jongmin quickly points his gun, but in an instant, his eye is pierced. After receiving the attack, the man mentally admits that they underestimated him, especially since he also to them. Besides his speed, he also possesses immense strength. Furthermore, those who witnessed his abilities firsthand never lived to describe them. Despite demonstrating such an incredible ability to continue fighting, Taea, he was even more severely injured, and his injuries were worsening. Junhyuk was desperate because no one had mentioned that his strength was so formidable. However, Junsu appears and calls out to the woman, requesting her to take the master outside, claiming that he will catch up with them shortly. Seeing this, the boy is surprised to notice that his cousin is trying to escape. He shouts, calling out to the guy, and severs both of his weapons. Junhyuk and running towards the elevator. Cheon peeks out to see what is happening, consumed by uncontrollable anger. Taea asks where he thinks he's going, as they haven't finished their confrontation yet. Confrontation. However, Junsu is at the entrance, greeting the young master. He is surprised to see that the president's bodyguard has arrived. Still, the boy jumps, ordering him to get out of his way. But surprisingly, the man stops both daggers with a single hand and prepares to strike him. The old man observes how much the boy has grown, admitting that he is impressed by him. With that, the man lands multiple blows all over the protagonist's body, causing almost all of his ribs to fracture. Consequently, Taea begins to spit out blood from all the damage he sustained. Breaking the blades with his hand, Junsu declares that, sadly, this will be the end for him. Striking the same spot, throws the body of the now defeated assassin away. However, the old man is surprised to see that his clothes have been cut. Looking at his subordinate, the man orders Jun-yok. He watches them a little nervously, unsure how to react. However, surprising the woman, he speaks in Italian, warning them that he was on a yacht that was attacked nearby. With that, to get up, claiming that he knows he isn't hurt, he admits that he thought he was finished. The old man warns that the building will explode soon, ordering him to take his companion and get out. Wow. Lying on the ground was the protagonist, looking as if he were dead. Upon arriving at the rooftop, the president's bodyguard heads towards the helicopter. Chong asks if the service concluded. The man confirms that it is and informs Junsu that he will detonate the building as soon as they take off. Junsu says he will make preparations for takeoff. However, the man orders him to just keep the door open and get them on board. Putting on his headphones, his bodyguard warns that they will be flying directly into the helicopter, so he suggests, close it. However, the psychopath insists that he needs to see it, claiming he has waited a long time for this moment. With that, the helicopter begins to take off, while Chong remains standing. In front of the door, he watches calmly while smiling, cursing and saying that he always hated that house. While the man complains about how annoying and hypocritical his family was, Dain and Junu stares intently at him. Suddenly, the madman recalls the protagonist saying that their business wasn't finished, and with a smile, he calls him a poor boy, remarking that he lived after all. To achieve his revenge, only to end up meeting the same fate, he asks if they both knew that the term family comes from the Latin famulus, meaning slave. Taking the detonator in his hands, he asks everyone to witness how Chonggae will change from now on, completely destroying the mansion that hosted the supposed secret meetings. Inside, Taea was lying on the ground, unconscious. Still dazed, he hears the sound of the helicopter and realizes that it's all over. Changing his mind, he declares that he still has time. She asks where such an impressive child came from. He explains that he is Korean, and that, during the storm, his family's boat was invaded by armed people who killed his parents and his Kanestocks. On the other hand, Chong watches the detonation of the place, having thrown the detonator down. The man says that they really ended things in a flamboyant way, as the protagonist jumps through the flames. The madman says he's going to lie down for a bit because it's so hot, and orders his subordinates to head straight to headquarters. However, Taea strikes him with her dagger, though she only manages to wound his calf. His cousin begins to scream in pain. Both bodyguards get up, worried about what happened. Irritated, his cousin calls him an insect and demands to know what he's doing. Protagonist asks if he really thought he could escape after destroying so many families. Hanging from the dagger, his weight causes it to tear Cheon's leg even further. As blood spurts out, Taea declares that she will kill him no matter what. Dain grabs his weapon and asks his lord to step back. However, the madman takes the gun and says he'll do it himself, pointing the gun towards his cousin. Cheon asks if he really believes he is the hero of this story, insisting that he is the main character. He calls him a criminal and orders him to die. As he falls, Tae manages to avoiding the fatal shots. Although he was hit in other places, he is left in free fall. Immediately after the helicopter door is closed, his bodyguard calls the hospital, warning them that they have an emergency. The protagonist was falling from an absurd height, but luckily, he collides with a tree, which decreases his speed. Still, he ends up hitting his back against the wall of a house. He then falls onto a truck, rolling until he is near a stream. Someone passing by on a bicycle ends up seeing the scene and stops, and looks in his direction. It was one of the victims he had saved from the security company earlier. The boy notices, from the state of his body, that this was the man who rescued him, the grandfather. The boss says that apparently, after being shipwrecked, he made it to the Salerno family's boat. Confused, the boy wonders what the Salerno family is. She starts laughing at the quarter. Young man wonders if he arrived too late. However, he hears a plea for help and looks back at Taea, trying to observe more carefully. The protagonist was asking for help, while barely he was able to stay awake. Even though he was extremely injured, he kept saying that he wasn't finished yet and pleading for help. On a messaging app, someone had sent an 11-minute audio file. The person requested backup, reporting that the individual had refused the breathalyzer test 3 times and kept insisting that he was Congressman Kim. That man was writing something while listening to the audio of former Director Kim using his influence to threaten the police officers. He asks someone if that voice and that name are clear. The person asks where the director is at that moment. The young man reports that he is probably at the police station giving his statement, and that he will be going home soon. His partner seems to be a little hesitant, so the man offers 200 and asks if it's enough to take down a big figure in the majority party. For a while, the only notification was that the person was typing, but, to his surprise, the counteroffer is 30. He's obviously extremely frustrated, insisting that it's worth much more. However, the buyer claims that it's not even election season, so nobody cares about those old guys. The man remarks that he clearly doesn't understand the current market, explaining that they pay 1x for an average person, 10x for a celebrity, but if it's someone connected to Hay, the value is 1000x. Taking a deep breath, he realizes that it all revolves around Cheongu. After a while, on the radio, a report comes on about an accident at a tower. Uninterested, the man switches off the device. He was preparing to leave, but instead of heading out into the street, he was situation, since an Asian boy who can speak Italian claims to have come from the Gulf of Aden, in the Middle East, while holding a knife. The woman says that's unbelievable, but she can't. In a restaurant, the owner was already making preparations to open up. The woman warns the boy that he'll be late if he stays there. The boy replies that it's fine, and that he'll make it on time if he goes by skateboard. Then she tells him to eat something, but if he does, he's really going to be late. Suddenly, someone appears, telling that boss to stop messing around. A man comes in, telling the lady that she should sell that place before they stop being polite. Boksu asks the boy if he disagrees with him. The lady asks if they're already there. They're early to get money, claiming that criminals know how to spend their time. The young woman asks the boy not to worry and to go to school, saying that either ways nothing is going to change. Although irritated, he has no other choice, and he takes a knife. The man says that he shouldn't say such things hastily, claiming that they are already 2 months behind on payments. The man orders the woman to sell the building and get the most out of it, stating that their interests align. She responds that she would never sell the place for crumbs, asking him to at least study some arithmetic before he goes back. Meanwhile, the boy is at a station waiting for his ride, completely exhausted by everything, and he just sighs, without knowing what to do. He admits that in his district, renovation fights are rampant, with disputes between groups like Cheongu and Oseon, making it a very neglected area, transforming into a lawless land where small gangs try to take advantage of the residents. People like him and that lady have nowhere else to go. After he gets back, the restaurant owner has several bruises on her face. Still, she just asks him to clean the tables. Concerned, he asks her what happened to her face. Names were displayed on 2 containers, Weejon Yo and Suyok Jin. Seeing the containers, a man says it has been a long time since he last saw his father and mother. In his, believe it. Pointing the blade at the boy, Regina asks if there is any reason why she shouldn't throw him back into the sea. The child doesn't know what to say to prevent that. Nervous, he tries to think of. A customer tells him that he saw some of Yaburi's men leaving, looking very upset. The man comments that they're probably trying to pressure people into selling their buildings, so they can remodel them. She tells him not to worry and asks the boy to put his backpack in the back of the store. The boy does as she asks. However, he angrily throws everything around. Irritated, the boy laments, realizing he really needs to do something, and remembers that Dr. Jonuk was a great friend of his father before he passed away. She was a professor at a medical school, but ended up crossing paths with the Oseon gang, although she still took care of him. None of what happened was her fault, nor was it the restaurant's fault, even though their food was good, and the dishes were always well prepared. Interrupting his thoughts, an idea pops into his head as he remembers what that guy told him on the phone. After all, someone from the Cheongu Group is worth 1,000 times the normal value, so the boy messages him again. The man nervously asks if he has any updates. The boy tells him everything. Sabe sent some images that corroborated his story, claiming that a bodyguard of one of Cheongu's security directors, Jocko, the leader of ADs, was involved. He was still very scared. He was awaiting the buyer's response. Not fully understanding, the man asks what the boy wants with it, but he quickly recalls the values mentioned earlier. The next day, it was a sunny Saturday. Some men in suits approach and ask if he is gay. He confirms, but looking back, he realizes that he shouldn't have. The man punches him in the stomach, knocking him unconscious and dragging him into a van. As they were taking him away, Grai finally understood why they were paying so much. After all, it was all a setup. The boy, something as quickly as possible. Taea then shows the pen his grandfather gave him, explaining that he is the grandson of Sioko, chairman of the Cheongu Group, and the son of Suyok, his grandfather's third son, was tied up and sitting in the security company's room. The leader says that at first, he thought he was just an annoying informant, but in reality, the guy is very skilled. He asks him where he obtained those images by inquiring if his father had hidden them before his death. The man then asks if the boy is the son of Jingu, one of those who reported Cheongu. Upon seeing this, he smiles slightly as he takes off his watch. The man asks if he finds that amusing, and with that, he punches the boy in the face, asking if that is also funny. Following this, with each blow, the man asks if he has any more files like that. He hits the boy repeatedly, throwing him to the ground while hurling insults at him. Still, Gray can't help but laugh and continues, laughing hysterically. Still chuckling, he says that the old man looks like a piece of trash he would use as a toilet, assuring him that if he had more files, he would have already sold them. The fat man orders his subordinates to bring the hammer. The guy threatens to knock out all of the boy's teeth until he understands that this is not a game. But, fortunately, one of the guards calls the old man, his subordinate. He informs him that an alert has arrived from headquarters, stating that they must handle security for the emergency meeting, wondering if it's truly a #1 priority, implying that they must leave immediately. Then, he orders them to cover the boy's mouth and lock him in the room, kicking him inside. The fat man claims he will return later to finish dealing with all of this. Inside the room, there was already an older man, and a woman still on the floor. He says his father was a fool, driven by his ridiculous sense of justice. He didn't even try to expose Cheongu. He simply died in a car accident with his mother, and instead, he should have hidden and lived a quiet life working for them. No. Because of this, instead of launching him again, they could help him contact his people, thus gaining benefits. Nervously, Regina asks if he is really talking about the Cheongu Group. They matter how important the information his father possessed was. As long as he was helpless, everything would be useless. However, they begin to hear guards questioning who that was the person. With that, the sounds of gunfire and screams began to blend together. Even the leader was desperate, ordering his subordinates to kill that man. Everyone started to feel fear, without understanding what was happening. Suddenly, the large door opens in front of them. The protagonist hands them the knife and orders them to use it to free themselves and escape. After that, he assures them that none of the three saw him there. Both of them don't quite understand what just happened. They begin to leave, expressing their gratitude for the help. It was at that moment that the boy looked around, and then, back one last time. Observing those bodies, Gray wonders if that man did all of that alone. After a while, he finally returns home. Jong-suk asks him what happened to his face and where he had been all that time. She gets even angrier and demands that he speak now, but Gray says that nothing happened. With a smile, a girl tells him not to worry. The boy heads to his room. The lady watches him, clearly worried. As soon as he enters his room, he collapses to the floor, still terrified. The boy wonders if the Ocean gang was the one who sent that man there. After all, they were armed, but even so, he killed them with just 2 knives, as if it were nothing. As he opens his drawer to look for something, the boy continues, questioning whether that man was sent by someone. Closing the drawer, the boy assumes that maybe there's something more behind all this, thinking it might be revenge. Remembering the moment when the head of the department spoke about his father, he wonders if he might have more files related to Cheongu. The boy admits that no matter how important the Cheongu, she points out that it is the most successful conglomerate in South Korea, and apparently, that brat is part of the family. Therefore, the manager orders her subordinates to verify information it's worthless unless you have the power to use it. While accessing the files, Cry says that he needs power. The man says that it's practically impossible to find it. Among those files, he only recognized his face. However, he remembered what one of the subordinates had said when announcing the emergency meeting. With that, he recalled the code. Priority Level 1. Upon accessing the Cheongu Association Directive and seeing that it was also noted among his father's papers, he declared that he had finally found it. It was reported that, in the event of a significant incident, the executive members would begin a meeting at the Bugok Mountain Annex. However, despite all of that information, the actual location was not provided. About to give up, Gray said he didn't care, since he didn't even know the man. Still, he remarked that not everyone who considers Cheongu is considered by him in return. On the police radio, information was being broadcast about the massacre that Taea was carrying out, with several victims already confirmed. The extent of the damage was unknown, but it was confirmed that the mansion had been secretly used by the Cheongu executives. Getting up, the boy realizes that it can only be that man, and therefore decides to go there. He grabs his bicycle and leaves in the middle of the night, even though he doesn't know who that person was or their motives for doing all of that. The best decision he can make at that moment is to go there. That's when he saw someone hanging from a helicopter. After following the sound of gunshots and screams, the boy heads to the place where the person might have fallen. However, upon seeing him in that state, he thought that the man was dead. Seeing that sheet in his hands, and that person's request for obsidian, he focuses on his face, as he declared that it wasn't over. Gra is surprised by all that news related to Korea. While they are both searching for something related to what the boy said, the woman asks him if he knows how to speak any other languages. He reports that he knows Cantonese. Determination. After a while, he arrives home, screaming for his adoptive mother. As always, she was working, and got scared. The woman asks, "Who is it, and what happened to him?" Desperate, the boy asks Jonuk to save that person. Some time passes, and the protagonist is already feeling better, questioning who Jonuk is, and why he saved him. Grai introduces himself, and says that he buys and sells information, claiming that he has recently been looking for something specific. He assures him that he was hoping to find someone like him. Doubting his words, the protagonist asks if someone like him could really be a data broker. The guy continues, saying that he is closer to being an information wholesaler, always providing excellent data to his customers. Furthermore, his main clients are other information traders and the financial sector of Juwido. He explains that he was close to dying after falling into a trap set by the Cheongu because he thought he was about to find a fellow informant. Taea asks if the boy is one of the hostages from that day, questioning whether or not he even recognized him. Having only met him once, Gray confirms and says that he wants to win an award for being the youngest data broker, or something along those lines. With that, the protagonist begins to come in on a. Looking around and observing the things the boy owns, he then asks how many days it's been, and the boy replies that 4 days have already passed. The guy wonders if he had slept for that long. However, he calls Gray and asks if this broker would be able to find someone for him, but unfortunately, Gray has to admit that he was bluffing, claiming that it was difficult, even, to find him, saying that he would need another broker for that. Furthermore, finding someone requires a lot of money, and above all, he would like to ask for something in return for saving him, since he spent English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi, and Esperanto, claiming he is fluent enough to hold basic conversations. One of the men says that he has found a lot on medical expenses. Ignoring everything else, the protagonist asks if what the boy is trying to say is that he can't find the person. Gray then asks, what would the guy do if he couldn't find them? However, Tae simply turns around and says it's all right. Picking up his jacket, he thanks them for their help and says he'll delete it once he sorts everything out. The boy asks if he's really going to leave like that way, but the protagonist says that he still has things he needs to take care of. As a final word of advice, he tells the boy not to get involved or try to stop him, because it won't end with just one kidnapping. Frightened, Grai just sits back down in his chair, but then smiles, realizing that apparently, that's just how things work around here. After leaving the boy's room, he notices a very strong smell of pork and wonders if the place is a restaurant, which surprises Tae. Zhang tells the boy he shouldn't be standing, explaining that he was hit by 22 caliber bullets, which made it possible to stitch him up. But what if his fractures don't remain immobile? He'll be in trouble, even if a doctor helps him again. Thanking him politely, the protagonist says that the woman must be the doctor who saved him, and he assures her that he will pay her back. However, she says that she is not a doctor, claiming to be the owner of a jibap restaurant, and asks him not to return there if the points open up again. So the protagonist goes outside, looking around and wondering if it's a market. Ignoring those things, Taea takes a cell phone, and, upon answering, says that it's not his cell phone. Grai informs him that his own phone broke and, while he fixes it, he can keep that one, also mentioning that he has a box with headphones in his pocket. He asks the protagonist to use them, taking the device. Taea is surprised by its size. The guy explains about the battery, the connection, and the microphone, also pointing out that the first button on the shirt is a camera. Korean news. Regina smiles, realizing how fascinating that is. She says that if the boy wants to contact someone in Korea, he can ask them for help, but the child remembers what the protagonist says he made himself very clear, claiming that he will die if he gets involved with him. However, to his surprise, the boy asks why he is exterminating the Cheongu family. The boy asks, don't be surprised. After all, even if Korea is in chaos, something like that wouldn't go unnoticed. The entire country became a disaster while he was unconscious, with news that the Cheongu family was the victim of a terrorist attack. Tae asks why she wants a favor from him. Knowing this, the boy explains that in that neighborhood there are many power disputes between Oseon, Cheongu to obtain the remodeling rights. In addition to the two gangs getting closer and closer to that area, there are many other problems that make life more difficult. Even so, since the protagonist's problem seems to be more urgent, he will help, but in exchange, he wants assistance in the future. Until everything is resolved, they cannot lose contact. However, if Tae refuses, he will have to hand him over to the Cheongu. Obviously, the guy is not happy about that at all. However, he says he wants to see what the boy is made of. After a while, he was already walking through a more crowded area, heading towards a luxurious building. He had gone to some kind of bank, where he had a unique safe deposit box. With it, he opens one of the drawers, searching for something. Gry. He admits that he didn't know a company like that existed in Seoul, asking if they could be traced using it. But the protagonist explains that these companies operate based on trust, so they would never consider negotiating with other businesses. He says that people usually go there to hide jewelry or their wrongdoings, making that place the most secure it could possibly be. Seeing that, the boy realizes that this guy is apparently prepared to disguise himself. He remains thoughtful, observing Taea's actions, confused, since the murderer, grandfather had told him, asking him to look for lawyer Kim, since that man would know how to help him. The protagonist states that he needs her to contact someone outside of his, has no firearm, and a knife wouldn't be enough. Many drops of sweat begin to fall to the ground. His body is becoming heavier, making it difficult for him to maintain his composure. Neutral, also feeling as if he himself was being stabbed, experiencing the same sensation as when Regina struck him. The protagonist inquires whether the boy located the individual who tasked him with searching. He asks if the CEO of the company, Nightmobi Pigeon, is the broker who facilitated his entry into Korea. Apparently, he had worked in Europe, gaining fame in the region, and, apparently, he is seeking a clandestine ship to travel to China. Gray explains that border security has intensified since that guy's actions involving the Chonghae family. The protagonist instructs the boy to inform the merchants that a ship is available, but with fares 10 times higher than the usual rate. His partner questions what he intends to do upon finding that guy, wondering if Tae plans to leave with him, and sheathes his knives. He declares that he will kill him. The reason he nearly died that day was because someone leaked his information. The only one who knew its location was Piljeon. Coldly, the protagonist insists that traitors must die. Later, inside a church, he admits that he doesn't care if someone is a lifelong friend or not. A hooded figure enters the chapel. Approaching the confessional, the boy calls out to the priest and asks if they can speak privately. After uttering a specific phrase, each seeks their own advantage. Piljeon complains about the heat in the place, wondering why they are meeting in such a sacred location. He assures the priest that he may not seem like it, but he is still a devout Catholic. However, the priest simply asks about the location of the money. The informant searches for the money in his bag, displaying the 100 million, intending to exchange it for $10,000. Family. In Seoul, at 1:12 inches the morning, someone answers the phone, asking who is calling. The person says that he is calling from abroad, and informs them that he will only communicate in English. Changing the subject, Piljeon says he needs to know something. After all, that country is full of frauds like the priest, which is why he can't trust him. Greya warns that there are many men are outside. Suddenly, several people burst in wielding melee weapons. The man claims it's extremely strange that someone could acquire a boat, when even he, a person, who works with information, couldn't find one. He asserts that the rule for this kind of work is clear. If someone lies, that person must pay with their own life, admitting that the protagonist must be prepared to face the consequences of his actions. But, leaving the guy terrified, Taea says she can hardly believe he didn't recognize his own friend's voice. Pigeon doesn't believe what he's hearing, saying that he was assured that his friend had been killed. The man quickly realizes that talking is pointless. Still, he claims he was a fool, since he should have been suspicious as soon as he noticed the password was an Italian expression. Trying to explain himself, his friend says that he lost everything due to gambling. He ended up in Korea and acquired large debts at the Cheongu casinos. As he raises his weapon, Pigeon tries to convince him that he wouldn't have said anything if he had known they were going to try and kill him, but before he could finish his sentence, Taea bursts through the confessional wall and pierces his throat. Pigeon panics, trying to stop the bleeding from his neck. The men who were outside ask what's going on. Through the camera hidden in the protagonist's shirt button, they could see the guy's body and all the blood that had been spilled. Obviously, Gry is scared. Despite having all those injuries that most people wouldn't even be able to walk with, Taea was still going to fight. Emerging from the confessional booth, the protagonist says that, according to him, Pigeon ordered them not to carry. He asks if it's attorney Kim. Regina says that, judging by the photo the lawyer sent her, He must have already noticed that she has the group's precious grandson with her, and asks if she should send him back. Their weapons to avoid conflict. The psychopath tells everyone to pray before starting, asking them to let God know that they will soon be with him, stating that it doesn't matter if they are hired or subordinates of his friend. Gry didn't know what to do, seeing all of that. The protagonist says that the mere fact that they are armed with batons and knives is enough to consider them a threat to his life. In that case, there's no reason to hold back. They ask what that guy can do with a broken arm. One of them runs to hit him, saying that, from what's seen, there's money in the confessional. The protagonist simply prepares to defeat them. The guy admits that the killer's broken arm is the only problem, since he has fractured ribs, fractures, and gunshot wounds. However, he moves smoothly as he dodges the attack and, with a single movement, pierces the back of his opponent's neck, moving to attack the next one. Again, he dodges the blow while slashing the man's throat. He quickly throws the knife at another's neck. One of them runs to try and stab him. However, Jan Bick uses the sling to immobilize the enemy and swiftly elbows him with his other arm. With that move, Tae had defeated everyone who dared to face him in an instant. He explains that when someone gains an early advantage, it becomes difficult for their opponents to recover and avoid losing their way. Considering all that money dangling right in front of their eyes, it was, obviously, adrenaline would take over. Still, there was someone else among them. One person possessed something they shouldn't have, but some of those guys moved towards him. The protagonist takes a created, simple step forward, disappearing from everyone's sight in that manner. Utilizing his speed, he moves past the men. Obviously, his goal was to eliminate the one who posed the greatest threat to him. Thoughts. He admits there was a time when he wondered about the value of human life. 17 years ago, at 10:32 p.m., in the Gulf of Aden, a cruise ship began to sink. The boy, to Korea. However, the old man asks what she means by that. She makes an offer of $100,000 and informs him that they must meet at the Panama Canal for the exchange. The two who had stepped forward to attack him are left utterly bewildered. Even Gray is unable to comprehend what just transpired. With that, the weapon falls to the ground following his attack. He calmly begins to turn to the others, asking who's next in line. Despite all the chaos inside, the church outside seemed completely unaffected. In the parking lot, there was just a Gray was inside, unable to believe what he had just witnessed, thinking that this man didn't even seem human, because despite his injured body, he still managed to do all of that. Suddenly, Taea calls out to the boy and asks if he's listening to him. The protagonist asks the boy to go to the confessional and grab a bag of money, since he doesn't have the strength to do it himself. The boy asks, frightened, "What are you talking about?" But the guy tells him that he knows he's in the area. After all, he warned him about the men before. They showed up. Gray doesn't know how to respond in that situation. Despite being a little nervous, he simply accepts the mission. So the guy gets out of the vehicle and heads towards the church. With that, the boy. He goes to the door, a little withdrawn, and opens it. Before him, the church was completely stained with blood, with bodies scattered all over the place. The protagonist was sitting on one of the benches. He lets her know that he is upstairs. Even more nervous, Gry begins to walk. Upon arriving at the cabin, he notices the body of the protagonist's former friend. He feels a little nauseous. After all, there were many bodies all over the place. The boy says that he called a taxi and advised that it should arrive in the next 10 minutes. However, when he looks at his partner, the boy realizes that Taea is extremely unwell. He asks him what's wrong and tells him that he will call Jonuk and ask him to prepare some medicine for them. However, the man claims he's too busy to negotiate, so he makes a counteroffer of $1 million, setting his glass down on the table. He grabs a nearby microphone and starts cursing. Guy stabs his cell phone. At that moment, Gry freezes in fear and removes a glove. The protagonist says that when he woke up, his clothes and cell phone had been changed, but the funniest thing is that his gloves were still on. Obviously, the child just listens without saying anything. In Taea's hand was the mark of the Salerno family as he looks at the F5 boy. The guy claims he knows who he's dealing with. Gry simply nods affirmatively, stating his name, his father's name, and the fact that he is the grandson of the deceased president of the Cheongu Group. He is the only Asian member of the Italian Salerno Mafia, around 20 to 30 years old, with a 5.5 billion bounty on his head. The boy claims that he wasn't planning anything against anyone, maintaining that not even the lady knows, and claims that he just needs his help. Taea asks if that value is worth more than the risk of losing his life or having someone collect the bounty on his head. Dre tries to say that the reason he and his adoptive mother are living in hiding is because of the Cheongu, but the protagonist interrupts him, assuring that the best option for the boy would be to hand him over to the Cheongu instead of going through all of that trouble. remembering the conversation they had earlier when the boy said that's what he wanted, to win some award by becoming the youngest racer, realizing that the reason his career was stagnating, despite his potential to do more and still be involved, was something that no one in the business would do. It's because of his lack of experience. That's why great informants are usually older. With that, he asks if Gry wants to enter a much larger field. A little more. Later that afternoon, in a large, modern building, two people were walking through the hallways, while one told the other not to say anything unless directly asked. Wim gets angry and announces that it will be $1 million. While dancing with some people, the madman declares he'll pay $1 million if she kills Taea, ordering the woman to kill the boy and send him proof. He assures him that he would never say anything that would put Ocean at a disadvantage. His partner tells him that the people in the gang aren't exactly known for their eloquent communication skills. Although annoyed, he has no way to refute it. The two enter, and the man apologizes for having kept that person waiting. Back in the chapel, Taea praises the boy's work, saying that he will fulfill the favor, but he would also like them to work together afterward. He tells him that Gry will be risking his life and won't have an easy death if he's caught. However, he can become the best if they work together. The protagonist says that is a promise. After all, he will crush the Cheongu once and for all. The leader of the Ocean admits that he did not. He expected them to contact him so soon, as he understands that Cheon must be busy with his relative's funeral. He states that they wouldn't go anywhere before being contacted, but the man raises his hand, asking them to be quiet. They both feel afraid of what might happen. The stranger makes a small hand gesture, asking for silence. That begins to nod its head in agreement. Some kind of speaker starts playing music. He raises his hand, making a fist in a kind of resistance pose. Both the members of the Ocean band don't understand what that means. Despite this, someone begins to applaud. The man who accompanied women says it's a shame they arrived just as the performance was ending. Cheon asks if he knows the piece. The man says the exact name, but notices that the composition seemed disjointed, presuming that perhaps it was because of his interpretation. This clearly doesn't make the guy happy. He orders his bodyguard to turn it off, while Dane covers his ears. The man says that was a 6th grade piano competition, on video within the next 5 minutes. That way, he'll receive $1 million as a reward. Regina asks what would happen if he doesn't send her the money after she completes the job, while everyone watches, assuming he never practiced again after that. Furthermore, all the relatives who came to see his performance that day are now dead. The man asks if they know what happened, assuring them that they do. If they had known who was coming, they wouldn't have been so helpless. However, Weeman claims he had already warned them, even advising them to cancel the meeting, since the assassin wasn't just, as he says that he was the one who didn't listen to his warnings. Cheon reaches out and tells him to put that cigarette away, claiming that he was the one who knew best. This visibly infuriates him. Cheon says that this was a traditional emergency meeting of his family, something that can't be cancelled on a simple whim, and assures him that's why he paid him 200 million won, to take care of that man discreetly, without alerting the other members. The man rests his knee on a kind of cane, and, while touching his leg, says that instead of watching out for the assassin, they suffered losses, and now he will have to use it. With that, the man says he can't help but wonder how Weeman is still alive, even though all the other bodyguards, they died. The man insists he already explained it, stating that the murderer kills according to their own rules, and those rules didn't apply to them. With a smile, the guy suggests that maybe one rule of a terrorist is to avoid friendly fire. This obviously infuriates Wim. He orders the guy to stop saying such things, asking if he really thinks he would jeopardize the honor of his family's organization, and his parents. Cheon remarks that it must be nice to have supportive parents, stating that even if he wanted to, his own are already 6 feet under. Suddenly, another member of Ocean adjusts his glasses, preparing to intervene. The man asks who was responsible for taking care of the terrorist. The guy assures him that it shouldn't even be a question. Lawyer assures her that he only needs to tap his phone 3 times to send such a small amount. Furthermore, Kin threatens that if she doesn't comply, he will leak to the press that they were, claiming it was Mr. Junsu. The girl once again looks at the old man suspiciously. Wyming's partner directly questions the bodyguard, who obviously confirms it. Immediate. However, even the man seems suspicious. He says he understands, and asks what Cheon wants from them. The Maluko states that he doesn't care about money or anything like that. He just wants to make sure they stay quiet about the incident. And if anyone asks, Wim never saw the killer before. The man doesn't understand why the Cheongu are trying to put an end to this matter. His partner lights a cigarette and asks if that's all they want. Cheon tries to ask him to put out the cigarette again, but Junsu touches his shoulder. Surprised, the guy looks at his bodyguard, who speaks for him, and assures them both that this will be enough. The Ocean representative says he needs time to process everything, and asks if the bodyguard also wants a cigarette. However, the man thanks him and says that he has quit smoking. Nevertheless, Cheon smashes the table, becoming increasingly furious, and asks them if they aren't afraid. After all, he'll be the new president soon and is wondering what that old geezer is up to. The guy then unleashes a string of insults and tells the little punk to know his place. Getting up, he retorts, that's exactly what his boss would say, which is why he's in his position. Saying his goodbyes, the man then directly addresses the bodyguard, stating that they're in agreement with the terms. Flicking his cigarette butt onto the floor, the guy asks them to have an ashtray next time, and a wet wipe along with it, if possible. With that, the three of them are left in the room in a deafening silence. Che remains quiet for a few seconds, not saying or doing anything. Y comments that it really is impressive, having put an end to all the arrogance of the Cheongu, responsible for the attacks. Ending the call, he tells his lord that there's no need to worry, as he has contacted some mercenaries in their vicinity. Thanks to that, with just his words, adjusting his glasses again, he says that's his function there, since it seems Cheon doesn't understand how things operate. He asserts that the former president, he really didn't teach him anything, and he deserved his fate for not having taken care of that brat sooner. The man stands there in disbelief, asking if he's really trying to say that. Calmly, the man claims that the incident was probably a coup planned by Cheon to get the president's position. The elevator opens, and they resume walking, declaring that it is essential to find the murderer who attacked the Cheongu Group. Women tries to say that the guy is dead, but his partner assures him that's not true. After all, Junsu is strong, but the moment he asked the old man that question was when he was able to directly confirm his suspicions. The guy is even more impressed by that entire explanation. He claims that it's not. It is unlikely that the man was hired by Cheon, since Junsu lost so many men. The assassin was only used at the very end. Wim recounts that when he met him, the terrorist, he said that he hadn't been to Korea in a long time, asking if they should try to bring him to their side, perhaps even managing to completely subjugate Cheongu. However, Mr. He says that would be good, but if they find him, they just have to kill him. The guy can't understand all of the above. However, the old man admits that what irritates him is that Cheon hasn't contacted, thinking that women is no match for the murderer, so the next time they meet, he needs to show them who's the boss. Japel admits he's not the biggest Ocean fan, but he still doesn't hate watching one of his men being beaten. Returning inside, as some ice cubes fall into a container, Cheon claims that there is one thing he has become very good at: thanking. The Cheongu Group is now entirely his. The boy remained paralyzed by everything he had just heard. After all, that man wants him dead within the next 5 minutes. What scared him even more was that the woman, his father, he asks if either of them wants to guess. The room is still a mess, with the broken coffee table, and both bodyguards remain motionless. Pouring the whiskey over the ice in the glass, the guy claims he's very good at picking up on subtle cues. He mentions that, when that old man asked if Taea was really dead, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Sitting back down on the couch, Cheon says that his bodyguard had assured him that his problems with his cousin were over. However, Tae jumped out and injured his leg. Furthermore, his body still hasn't been found. Bringing the glass to his mouth, he pauses for a moment with a terrifying look on his face. The guy asks if Tae is still alive. Junsu asks if the guy is suggesting that he allowed the former young master to escape. The old man says that he was the one who shot the boy from the helicopter. Cheon retorts that if he had done his job correctly, that wouldn't have been necessary in the first place. The bodyguard admits that the boy was stronger than he had anticipated. The angry man throws his glass against the bar and says that they have to move forward now. Retreating, the man claims his priority is the council meeting, stating he needs to secure their votes to join the committee. The psychopath says that, regardless, whether Tae is alive or not, the old man can't betray him, and he asks President Junsu if he isn't correct. The old man assures him that he never breaks his promises. They head to the rooftop, heading towards the helicopter. Sean Min was already waiting for them. Cheon is surprised to see that the guard managed to survive. The man says this is different from what he was promised, asking him to reconsider his transfer. He argues that he has served the Cheongu family for a long time, and therefore he cannot be transferred to be a bodyguard for a mere director. Annoyed, she says that apparently that's just how things work, now that the reason for keeping him alive is gone, causing him immense fear. Tae begins to beg for his life. However, Regina states, if he had known that would happen, he would never have betrayed his former boss. The madman approaches and asks who ordered the guard to be beaten. Before doing anything, Zhongming looks at Dain, simply hanging his head, is ordered by his boss to be grateful that he wasn't discarded despite his terrible contributions. Still, he yells out for Junsu. The old man. He tells him to remain calm for now, stating that he will contact him in the future. With that, the helicopter begins to take off. Zhongmin simply watches them. Elsewhere, outside, the rigid structure of the city, was Mrs. Jonuk's restaurant. Ta says he now understands why Grai was able to identify him, since his late father was an investigator for the company. The boy says that with the tattoo on the back of his hand and the 20-year-old Asian's search regarding the Cheongu massacre, it all made sense. Assuring him that it's not so bad, the protagonist praises him, saying that he did quite well. His adoptive mother comments that he seems to have a lot of free time on his hands. John Suk says that for someone from the Cheongu, he's back for revenge and must have plans, declaring that the boy shouldn't just stand there chatting, which makes Grays spit out his food. He then asks if the lady would betray him, just to see him preoccupied. At that very moment, the psychopath mutters to himself that traitors must die. His partner tries to defuse the situation, but the woman says that's fair, stating that a killer who lived his life for the Mafia can't be expected to easily trust others. However, the protagonist says he was just taking care of some matters that would be more important in case of an emergency. He asks the lady not to worry, stating that anyone hated by the Cheongu or the Osean isn't his enemy. With that, Taea resumes eating, that he is no longer part of a wealthy family, and that they are possibly already preparing his funeral. She asks if the boy understands what that signifies, claiming that such things are very common in their world. Quietly, they both sense that the killer is likely implying he could take care of them in the future if they betray him. Suddenly, some thugs barge into the restaurant, complaining about the atmosphere, and ordering the woman to crank the air conditioning up, asking how she expects to pay her dues if customers won't stay. John Suuk declares that he already paid everything, questioning why they are making such a fuss again. She asks Taea to come back after lunch and a smoke, and also tells Graya to head to school. Boksu tells him to leave them alone, in peace, assuring them that he won't do anything to them. However, he seems confused and irritated by something, saying he's never seen that kid around, and wondering how someone could end up eating at a restaurant like that. Meanwhile, the protagonist is surprised by the size of the radish kimchi. Furious, the guy asks if the brat is choking on his food or something like that. Getting up, Grai tells the lady that he's leaving for school. He heads towards the exit, glancing back as he remembers asking his partner to promise him something beforehand, to listen to his requests. He orders Tae not to kill or do anything of the sort, begging him not to turn the neighbors against each other. The protagonist asks if the boy thinks he's going after people, recklessly, but Grai states that's exactly what he did. Getting back to the subject, the guy asks what his request is. His partner reminds him that the 3rd district of Hangzhou is at a standstill between Cheonggye and Osean, and those disputes were really on the verge of becoming a disaster. Fortunately, a local gang, Yaburi, stopped the fighting. However, Tae questions whether a small gang is truly capable of preventing a power struggle between Cheonggye and Osean. Grai assures him again that everyone's safety was guaranteed by people kill others to seize their assets and accomplishments. Terrified, he asks why his uncles and relatives are plotting to kill his entire family. The two guards then speak to each other, saying, Yaburi. However, they are also buying buildings to create a housing cooperative so that they can negotiate in the future. The protagonist notices that he apparently disagrees with that. He asserts that if an agreement was the solution, they would have already reached one, stating that the mayor was elected with Oseon's backing. Also, John tried to speak with the boss, but apparently he doesn't think it's worth his time, asking Taea to speak on his behalf instead. However, she couldn't kill or irreversibly injure anyone. The protagonist admits that, in his opinion, they are nothing more than common criminals. Common, but they managed to make the crime leaders back down. He simply stands up while thanking Mrs. Beksu, and annoyed, asks if she's really going to ignore him. He tries to go towards the brat, but John steps in to block him. The woman claims that she already asked him not to touch her clients, saying that she already paid and asking why that ugly guy is there. The guy raises his hand to slap her, asking who she's talking about when she mentions a rotting face, but Taea stops the blow using a bowl. Thus, even before Grai walks away from the store, they are sent flying out the door. The protagonist emerges right behind them. The boy couldn't believe that the crazy guy did all of that in under 10 seconds. Boksu is frightened on the ground. He asks if the brat even knows who he is. As he walks toward the men, the guy mentally admits that his revenge consists of 30 grand plans, despite all the class planning. Some points were still uncertain. After all, He hadn't considered that his true enemy would be Chon, which is why he considers this a failure. However, he will be able to deduce his plan for the future, since, despite being from the Jin family bloodline, he will still need to be elected as president by the Administrative Council. This is how he'll use the development. Was extremely desperate as he looked around, searching for his parents. The storm grew increasingly intense. The boy screamed constantly, looking for that their boss won't kill him, but that she's still enjoying herself while provoking him. Trembling, he can't believe he survived the sea, only to die at the hands of people he doesn't even know, of the Hano district to disrupt the board, asking the criminals to take him to their boss. While they question if the boy is crazy, a girl who was on the other side of the street asks who he is. Suri questions if he intends to start a war against her gang all by himself. However, Tae simply replies, no, calmly takes out a cigarette and lights it, informing him that he's only there to have a conversation. Suri asks what he means by that, stating that she can't believe his words when her men are lying on the ground and he's speaking so casually. However, the protagonist only glances towards them, understanding the situation. The boy apologizes, saying that they don't seem interested in listening to him, so he doesn't want to talk to people like them either. So, looking up, Tae realizes that this was how they managed to keep both sides under control, with armed men spread throughout the buildings, and he states that if those guys controlled the entire city, the 3rd district of Hangseo would become the base of those armed forces. Also, if even one of them is already an official, it's certain that they have a system, very efficient, wondering if this is how Korea protects itself. The girl says she can hear his last words, begging her to be brief, and calling him bastard of the oceans, Unge. Obviously, that infuriates the madman, but before he can even take a step, a bullet impacts the asphalt in front of him. Sue orders him to say where he comes from, unless he wants to end up full of holes. The girl states that the boy better hurry up. However, that only makes the killer even angrier. Clenching his fist, he says he knew this day would come, stating that he cannot believe that this day is unfolding in such a rotten way. His bodyguards warn him that this is dangerous, asking if they should kill him. She quickly calls someone named Juarion. He asks what the name Cheongu signifies, and whether killing his parents and grandfather was truly worth it for the accusations they faced. Suddenly, someone bursts into the room, warning that they are under attack. His subordinate jumps from the top of the building, quickly landing in front of the protagonist. The guy was huge, literally known as Tank. The madman remains still, staring intently to the brat. However, contrary to expectations, Taea simply tells the guard to step aside. The man stares at him, unmoving, but unexpectedly does, as the protagonist ordered, leaving Zuri completely bewildered by the guard's behavior. The girl questions how he could betray her like that, as her other subordinates rush towards them. Surprisingly, the assassin simply grabs the smoothie she was drinking and, after throwing it away, remarks that it's no wonder nothing she does ever goes according to plan. This obviously leaves her bewildered, unsure of what just transpired. He leans in close to her face while looking up at the building, whispering something in her ear. She's left both confused and frightened by him, direction of things, and they retreat. The protagonist comments that, in any case, they don't seem worth his time. The girl remains paralyzed, as her men inquire whether they shouldn't pursue. However, she calmly approaches Juari. The man admits that he didn't sense any threat coming from the protagonist. The girl asks if that's why he let that crazy approach his boss, stating that his gang is really united. With a smile, the guy asks if she felt it too, claiming that even he was able to notice it, saying that it's been a long time since the war, long enough to forget what it's like to see something real. Later, still at the ladies' restaurant, they were working to put the door back in its place. Gry asks his partner to hold firmly while he screws it in. They fix the entrance to the restaurant. They both announce that everything is now in place, ensuring that the door now closes. The man reports that 3 heavily armed patrol boats and a military helicopter have appeared. She inquires if it's Interpol, but the man replies no, explaining that they are ignoring their radio transmissions correctly. While Jonik asks if he's sure he fixed it properly, Gaia assures him that he did, and begs him to give them food. Obviously, she scolds Taea, stating that if she ever breaks something, and he'll be thrown out. The lady kept scolding him because the door was expensive. However, Zuri appears and breaks it again. The girl asks, "What's the matter with that door?" Hugging Jonik, the brat says that she missed him and asks how he is doing. He pulls the girl's cheeks playfully. The woman asks when those delinquents will allow her door to see the light of day. Seeing that, the protagonist thinks to himself that the girl is completely different from how he met her during the day. Again, someone puts the door back in its place. In addition to fixing it, Sue says she heard that Bieksu laid hands on the lady last time, apologizing and claiming that he broke all her fingers to make sure she never did something like that again. However, the lady tells him to finish fixing the door and go eat, claiming that the girl is skin and bones. Grai explains to the protagonist, during a war that took place there, Jonuk helped treat many members of Yaburi. She also treated Sur's father for free on several occasions, which is why they regard her as their savior. He asks aloud, how can the lackeys of a gang treat someone who is considered their boss's savior in such a rude manner? Obviously, the girl doesn't like hearing that at all. Looking at her, the protagonist says that everyone calls her boss, but that she is merely a symbolic figurehead. She jumps up and wraps several cables around him, focusing particularly on his neck. Sur insults him, claiming that he has been going easy on them from the start. However, the brat doesn't seem appreciative. Feeling sure of herself, the girl demands that he repeat what he said. The protagonist notices that Regina doesn't understand what's going on. After all, someone would have to be completely insane to do something like this. Looking at the boy, she finally realizes who is responsible, realizing that those Koreans must have contacted these people to find the boy. Those cables are not normal, realizing that the tension within them is different. Surprising her, the madman claims that the girl should know that better than he does, stating that among those men they were positioned inside the buildings when he arrived, some seemed to have their weapons trained on a specific spot. Instead of aiming at the intruder, they were aiming at one of their own. Boss, implying that while everything seems to be at a standstill on the surface, she is merely a puppet being controlled from within. The moment he got closer to her, the boy asked Su to meet him at the ladies' restaurant because there were many spies there, and he inquired who had sent them to purchase the buildings in that area, questioning if it was Osoan. As the girl continues to investigate, the protagonist states that there is only one final possibility, asking if it was the Cheongu. However, the girl continues to investigate, visibly furious, but to her surprise, all the strings had been cut. With her dagger in hand, Taea says that she understood the answer. Elsewhere in the city, in a luxurious mansion, a man. He was banging on a glass window, begging the director to save him, and insisted that even with the failed Lebanon deal, he guaranteed he would collect double the revenue in 2 months. On the other hand, the director was on the phone, inquiring about what had happened. The spy reported that an intruder had approached Surpro, suggesting they might have been discovered, and asked how he should proceed. A cage begins to open, revealing a feline inside. A hungry lion emerges from it, heading towards the same courtyard where the desperate man was. The guy orders the animal to back away, desperately pleading with the director and begging for another chance. But, as expected, the guy does nothing, leaving the man to be killed and devoured by the beast. Out of nowhere, Taea pierces his right hand with the pen he's holding. Everyone is confused and doesn't understand what the boy is trying to do. In the photo he received, the protagonist's face was completely exposed, which the director found interesting. Inju orders that bring the brat to him alive. Tae says that, apparently, Cheongu was really the one behind everything in the entire 3rd district. Also, the reason why the girl didn't take care of them is because she is being threatened. Sui starts complaining about who that guy is. After all, he cut their threads like they were nothing, even though her best weapons were made of Kevlar. Kevlar. The girl indirectly questions who he is. The protagonist claims that he is simply the best person at killing Cheongu in the entire country. That obviously leaves her even more confused. He claims that if Cheongu is her problem, he supposes he can help her. Gray assures her that she can trust the protagonist. She is surprised by the arrival of the lady. Chinook also affirms that Su can trust that guy. That leaves her even more amazed, since the woman generally doesn't meddle in anything. With that, she steps down from the table and leaves. The girl says that if the problem were just killing a few people, everything would be settled already. Annoyed, she warns that this is her last warning, and orders Taea to leave the district, leaving and abandoning the 3 in the restaurant. Later, the protagonist and the woman were smoking outside. He thanks her for trying to help him earlier, when he asked her to. The girl would trust him if the issue was dealing with the Cheongu members. However, Jonik simply says it's the truth, complaining about whether anyone else is capable of facing them in this country. The protagonist asks who secretly orchestrated all that chaos within Cheongu. The woman claims it was the director of the Inge Electric Company, assuring him that this snake is always. He tells her that the Cheongu Group will never give her the money. Furthermore, the woman has nothing to gain if she kills him, behind everything, and reports that when the former boss of the Yaburi, Suri's father, was nearly killed in the redevelopment war, that man took him to the hospital, but only the 2 of them know about. That's because the rest of the neighborhood believes he's dead, because if they knew the truth, there would be resistance, and they would all end up dead. John-suk admits that, ideally, He'd love for everything to be resolved without Sue's father being killed, asking if Taea could help. They both remain silent for a moment. Someone reports in from B1, warning that the target is in their sights. He is asked if there were any conversations. The spy says yes, stating that Jonuk asked the intruder for help, claiming that the man is harder to read, and that's why he doesn't know what his response was. That was a mercenary from the private company Pick. The person on the other end of the line raises the possibility that the guy is a mercenary. B1 says that either way, he just needs to bring him alive. His partner asks about the woman and the boy from the restaurant, but the mercenary declares that he doesn't need them, stating that he will simply kill everyone. However, Taea was right behind him. The guy becomes extremely frightened when he notices his presence. The protagonist swiftly strikes his hand, preventing him from using the weapon, and rapidly closes the distance between them. His partner asks, "What was that?" inquiring if B1 is okay, and demanding an immediate response. However, the mercenary was still struggling to remove the knife that had been embedded in his hand. Meanwhile, the boy calmly walks over to the position from where his enemy had been observing him, picks up the radio that was lying on the ground, identifies himself as B1, and asks not to worry, bidding them farewell and saying they will see him soon. Sometime later, the next day, in a secluded hospital belonging to the Cheongu, a guy eats while stating that he had the reasoning of that child. The protagonist asks to join them, declaring that he will be loyal for the rest of his life if they help him achieve revenge. The woman wonders how, requested that all contracts be completed by yesterday, and asks if Suro is taking his words seriously. The girl replies that she is trying to convince everyone to sign the documents, stating that this way they will be able to avoid problems later on. Her father was breathing heavily with the assistance of machines. Inju says he doesn't really consider people useless as human beings. While stabbing something into the man's leg, the madman claims that, from his point of view, they are just pieces of meat. Obviously, the girl is shocked, and she shouts, continuing to hit her father with the fork. The director says the machines are beeping like crazy, claiming that it proves he's alive, and asserting that he's doing everything possible to keep that piece of meat alive. Suri, very nervous, assures him that she understands, saying that she will deliver all the signed documents, no matter the cost. She was shaking, while asking Inju to stop, claiming that she will do exactly as she was asked. He grabs the girl by the face as she begs him to leave her father alone. The madman, he calls Lady of the Night, assuring her that if she follows all of his orders, everything will be fine. Obviously, she was furious, but she couldn't do anything. The stranger says he loves to see that look. Defiantly, he states that she is worth taming, showing her a piece of paper. The guy asks, looking at the ground, if she met that man yesterday. She still seems a little dazed. The girl watches the photo of the protagonist, while claiming that he wants to meet him, asking that she bring him before the end of that same day. She stops crying, still looking at the photo, and retreats. The guy asks her not to forget about that, stating that the girl has a lot to lose if she betrays them. A doctor bows in front of the director. The guy walked nonchalantly to the elevator, while calling. He learned it at the Salerno insignia. The crazy woman starts laughing hysterically. Excited, Regina orders Matteo to prepare, as she needs to start the show. Before, someone who doesn't answer. Another person was also present in the elevator. Inju was irritated, questioning why those criminals weren't answering him, stating that he sent them to. Looking for Taea, he continues to complain while glancing at the other person inside. As expected, it's the protagonist, who is simply observing the director. He attempts to speak, but the boy simply slices off his ear. Not fully understanding what just happened, Inju looks down and sees the severed piece. Obviously, he starts screaming. Desperately, Tae claims he heard about it through rumors, saying that apparently the director was behind the whole thing. The guy then asks if the protagonist even knows who he is. Him, attempting to punch him. Inu questions how the boy dares to lay his hands on her, recalling that, during her conversation with Jonuk, she mentioned that, during the war of the Cheongu redevelopment, they hired mercenaries, specifically men from Company P, relentless killers who will do anything for money. The protagonist questions if the director, he really thought everything could be solved by throwing more money at it. Grabbing the mercenaries' dog tags, Taea declares that if the guy wants to spill blood, he has to be prepared to see his own blood spilled. Shoving all the tags into the madman's mouth, the psychopath assures Inu that no matter where or when, he will find him and stab him once a day. From that moment onward, with that, he orders them to prepare and take aim, announcing that the race begins right there. After some time, the guy was running desperately, wondering what was happening, and collapsing to the ground as the protagonist calmly approached him. The director screamed for him to stop, crying and begging him not to come any closer. Tae has killed Leaving, she asks if the boy understands the weight of those words, questioning whether he truly wants the power of revenge, even if it means staining his hands with blood. Remembering that his grandfather had said that, all the security guards, which explains the complete lack of resistance. The boy stabs him in the leg and tells the guy to stop being so dramatic, assuring him that the femoral region has plenty of muscles, so he won't suffer a serious injury. As he pulls out the blade, the protagonist says that compared to the other places where he was hit, this one wasn't so bad. Cleaning his knife, he says that you will see tomorrow. After a while, a kind of festival painting appears. Chon Bibi arrives and reports that, of the 15 directors, 7 are his allies, 6 are supporters of the vice president, and the remaining 2 are impartial, stating that in difficult times they should remain united and lamenting the situation. Another person agrees, saying that he can hardly imagine how distraught the late president would be about this. They say that the 2 impartial individuals can only be persuaded with actions, ensuring that the young people are surpassing the vice president. However, unexpectedly, Chon calls Inge and tells him that he heard he is working on the Hanseo redevelopment case, asking if you can expect good things to happen before the meeting. Nervous, the director simply nods, which seems to reassure him completely. However, the man starts laughing, telling him not to be so formal, and asking why he's so nervous. Terrifyingly, the madman tells his partner to try their best so that they can avoid any future hostility. As he places his hand over the last wound, Eno insists that he doesn't want something like that to happen again. Later, he heads to his car, sitting in the back seat while feeling intense pain, and he remembers the protagonist's words as he stabbed him with his dagger. The guy curses him, vowing to destroy him next time. His driver asks if he should take him home. The director kicks. No matter the means necessary, he had to inherit Geu at all costs. Determined, the protagonist simply nods. With a smile, she says that dogs that bark rarely bite. His seat, asking if he really needs to ask such a question, causing Inju to shut everything that can be shut. Ta appears in the passenger seat, asking if the man committed some crime. Obviously, the madman can't believe he managed to get there by using his blade. The protagonist then quips that, apparently, that leg isn't very well educated. He quickly stabs the guy in the knee with it. This causes the director to scream desperately. After that, the psychopath calmly gets down as if nothing happened and says he will be back tomorrow. Scared, Inu. He asks who he is and why he keeps doing this, stating that he won't get what he wants if the guy doesn't tell him why. With that, night arrives. Ta says it's already the 7th day and, although he has stabbed him in non-fatal areas, the director must surely be reaching his limit, claiming to Suri that even if he is handed over, his group will never recover. They ask what the protagonist had in mind when going after the director, stating that it was very difficult to expel them in the first place. One of them asks their boss for permission to kill him, claiming that if he doesn't hand them over, another war will break out. Suri questions his motives and why he came all the way there just to tell her this. However, Tae simply mentions the existence of Error 307, explaining that this error prevents people from using the online bank completely, an error that journalists usually encounter. Furthermore, the internet speed there is below 10 kilobytes, as if everyone is grinding their excess teeth, anxiously waiting to be released, and she asks why this is happening. However, the 2 guards claim that he doesn't understand anything, insisting that the guy is just an outsider. Even though she knows that all of this is because of the Cheongu, she still stands firm for her families, stating that if they only wanted to protect their family, they should have stayed out of the way, and she demands to know relatives. He tries to swim against the strong sea current. At that moment, the boy notices 2 bodies floating. As he gets closer, Don realizes that one of them is his mother. Looking at her body, even so, that's very interesting. The crazy woman kicks the door, asking to be accompanied, claiming that, from that moment on, the child's life belongs to the Salerno family, which is why he will live and die for them. Why they didn't respond. However, Sue just lowers his head, at a loss for words, and retreats. Tae says the director will try to handle that alone, as he can't bother the council, ordering them to prepare. Juarian asks what the boy gains from all of this. He claims that he will obtain the title of director in Cheongu, in the very same house where Inju released Leon, so that he would devour his subordinate. One man comments that it's a tragedy for both of them. The CEO of mercenary company P says he never imagined that the powerful director would be suffering such humiliation at the hands of an outsider. However, Inju orders the guy to shut up, claiming that he doesn't accept that because he enjoys it. While smoking, he curses the protagonist, saying that if it weren't for the council meeting, this would already be resolved. If you ask why he doesn't simply mention that, The guy fervently denies that possibility, asserting that they call that meeting, in that way, symbolically, claiming that he will be able to completely reorganize Cheongu, stating that he has always maintained a friendship with Cheon, and that after he is finally appointed, he will have a sort of god on his side, who tells him he better give it his all as well, because if the project fails, he will also be punished for associating with him. With that, Insik. He says that crazy guy managed to take care of his men, so he did a background check himself, asking Inju if he has heard of the Salerno family from Italy. He admits he has no idea and asks if it's some kind of mafia. The CEO confirms, claiming they are crazy, and says that the boy is one of them, known by the name Vendetta, being their best executioner. All that is known is that he is Asian, and claiming that as a senior director of Cheongu, he must have a lot of money. With that, Insik asks how much he needs. He says that if, for her, so, he must watch carefully, as that is his future. Taea watches intently and is shocked by what he sees. With that, 17 years pass, and he finally returns to Korea. The boy, a nuclear bomb were to appear, they would need to create their own bomb, and declares that someone who rivals him has been called to Korea. He says that Jerome is a guy who has already crossed paths with that person, twice, but lived to tell the tale. However, the director says he should have found someone the protagonist could understand, not just someone who has simply survived. However, the guy explains that the boy is infamous because he chases traitors to the ends of the earth, recounting that Vendetta once went to the Amazon jungle to hunt a traitor, surviving only on insects. Inju asks if that doesn't make Jerome good at escaping, but Insik says that if that were the case, he wouldn't have gone so immediate. The SEO reports that the commission fee is $700,000 upfront, $300,000 afterward, and another $300,000 for brokerage. He claims that it was very difficult for him and his men to bring to that guy. The man asks how many men Insik has left. He assures him that if he wants his company to participate, the payment will have to be doubled. The director makes a call, ordering that, take 200 kilograms of banknotes to the first basement floor. With that, the elevator door opens, and inside, something gleamed, reflecting the light. He asks the CEO if he really has. It makes sense to spend $300,000 to kill a single man. Inju says that there are 200 kilograms of 50,001 bills there, each weighing about 0.97 grams, stating that the guy can do the math, assuring him that it's more than enough to retire him, and saying that they need to have a productive conversation. Someone was observing the blueprint of some place. Grai says that it's the blueprint of the director's property, and reports that he contacted a security company and bought the sign. Taea asks how he managed to buy that. The boy says that he asks his father and mother to protect him while he takes his revenge. However, he seems surprised by something. Quickly turning around to look behind him, he jumps to the side as several outside of the Cheongu insurance company, all the others make exchanges for money. After all, Cheongu is always ready to replace anyone who doesn't generate profits. In other words, their employees have no loyalty, and upon hearing this, the protagonist remarks that his grandfather would turn over in his grave. The boy explains that most of Inju's directives originate from headquarters. Therefore, while risky, the optimal time for action is 10 p.m. However, they realize they lack the floor plan for the first basement level. Grai asserts that a plan must exist, headquarters, so it will be risky, but the best time is 10 at night. However, they note that they do not have the plan for the first floor of the basement. Grai says he's sure there is one, since there are stairs and elevators, but he assumes that perhaps the plan is with the director himself. He notices that the code B1C appears repeatedly, and, based on his research, it indicates a specific type of cement, used in construction, known for its high resistance to humidity, chemicals, and weathering, making it suitable for soundproof walls and even applications in zoos. Hearing this, the protagonist pauses, lost in thought for a moment. Ta then asks the boy to do him a favor. Grai responds that he's all ears. Vendetta approaches the boy and whispers something into his ear, prompting him to ask why she would say that. Suddenly, but the protagonist just says he figures he'll need it. Grai says he has one at home, but he never imagined the guy was the type to use such things. However, Taea claims that there's no type for those things, asking the kid to keep an eye out for any intruders detected by the CSV. After that, he calmly leaves the restaurant. Someone asks if he's going out again. Juwarian asks if the madman is going to provoke the director again. The protagonist says it seems unlikely that someone who's being stabbed every 24 hours would see that as just a provocation. He says he's been there since the revolution in the 90 seconds, and because of that, he knows how to identify true talent. Still, he's never heard of him before, and asks who. Shots impact the area, Several soldiers had arrived at the site in vehicles and fired multiple shots at Taea. Someone asks if those insects even the boy is. Ta asks if knowing who he is would change anything. The big guy seems a little annoyed by that, warning that if he refuses to explain, he'll be considered a threat to the boss, and he will have to eliminate him then. The protagonist simply watches him with indifference, remarking that the man has no idea of his opponent's capabilities. Even so, he still wants to fight. He fights cleanly instead of plotting to gain an advantage, claiming that he was apparently part of the Ocean gang before retreating. Vendetta says that he also trusts in his abilities, which is why he will leave that place under your care while he is away, guaranteeing that he will personally compensate you in the event of redevelopment, offering a value 10 times greater than what was initially offered. The night finally arrives. The director's mansion was as silent as always. The protagonist had managed to slip past the guards at the entrance. With a certain amount of caution, the assassin opens the door, slowly, using his knife to prop it open. Then, he begins to walk through the rooms, searching for his target. Seeing how everything was silent, and with the lights off, Taea assumes that maybe the guy still hasn't returned. However, he notices the staircase that Grai suspected led to the basement's first floor and wonders if that's the entrance. Thus, the madman simply dog. He starts descending the stairs, finding himself in front of a glass window displaying a lion habitat. To his surprise, the door slams shut. Ino speaks through a speaker, saying that it's good to see him again. Obviously, Vendetta realizes that this was an ambush. The director says that he suspected from the beginning that Vendetta had obtained his agenda. After all, the boy always knew when to strike, calling the assassin a disgusting insect. With that, the lion's cage opens. The guy says that no matter how skilled the protagonist is with his knives, know how to aim. A guard and manager from the Cheongu Group orders them to search for the senior administrative director, stating that he doesn't know the man, but he must be crazy to think he could. He will never be able to face two lions. Logically, the felines begin to roar, demonstrating that they are the predators. Ino states that she couldn't do anything in the 3rd district. Because of the Ocean bandits, he now has the perfect excuse, declaring that as he is devoured alive, that place will collapse as armed assassins infiltrate. Ensuring that the boy and all the scum of the 3rd Ward will be eliminated that night, the director calls the lions by name and orders them to attack. With that, the lions begin to approach him, running quickly toward their prey. Obviously, even the protagonist feels fear at a moment like that. However, he grabs the flamethrower and still criticizes the lions' names, saying that they are both males, and finishes them off with bullets. Seeing that, Inju no longer knows what to do, as his plan has completely failed. The director asks if that was a weapon, questioning why the psycho isn't using his knives. However, Ta says that daggers are for humans, asking if the guy thinks this is a comic times for times humans. Imagine someone actually doing that. Speaking on the phone, he contacts Gray, noticing that he still has a signal. Cutting the splint off his arm, he warns that an attack will happen soon, asking the boy to. He tells Zuri to get ready. With that, Inu starts trembling with fear and nervousness, remembering the story of how he entered the Amazon jungle alone to hunt down a traitor, surviving for a month by eating only insects. He becomes increasingly frozen as he observes how calmly the protagonist speaks on the phone. Vendetta, in a terrifying manner, looks at the camera, stating that, while Gray does his thing, he will go hunt down the director. The boy warns everyone that Cheongu is headed their way, especially alerting Pick Company. He confirms that the kidnap a Cheongu director. One of the subordinates tells the manager that they found the car they were looking for. He orders everyone to be careful when opening the trunk, because the message ends with Taea asking them to wait for his return, as he is going to capture Injo. Furthermore, since this fight was inevitable, the best choice is to confront them head-on. If they don't, that will be the end for everyone. The Yaburi are enraged, claiming that this con man must have escaped after causing all that mess. Gray tries to defend his friend, assuring them that he will return, but the guys tell him to shut his mouth. They say the brat doesn't even know what the last war was like, saying that children his age died, leaving their parents in mourning to this day. Stopping the parents, boy, Jonuk also guarantees everyone that Taea will return. Some ask what that man is to the lady. However, another person declares that this is enough. Advisor Suwon orders everyone to remain silent, stating that this is not a decision for them to make, and asks their boss what they should do. The girl was obviously irritated and worried as well. Suri says that she didn't see the last war, since by the time she returned, it had already ended. Leaving them confused, the girl says that she was afraid of losing her father, and that's why she became the puppet of the Cheongu. Apologizing for deceiving them, state that now is the time to end everything. Therefore, all members of the Yaburi gang must unite and expel Cheongu from there once and for all. INSIC reports that the director's plan is to kill everyone residing in the 3rd district, because no homeowner is entitled to significant apartments. The construction company can obtain greater profits by selling luxury apartments, even though the truce with the Okons prevents them from attacking. With the appearance of the intruder Vendetta and the assassin who pursues him, the story changes. His men say that the killer appears to be a decoy. The bald man confirms this, claiming that the despicable Gyu is good at what he does, and warns that it is. The director is still alive. As he orders his wounds to be checked, a large explosion goes off. The guy is irritated by the audacity of someone planting a bomb there. However, suddenly, strictly necessary to stay out of the fight until the Akon gang arrives, since Vendetta and that guy will be the ones responsible. Jerome was nonchalantly observing everything, admitting that he initially didn't expect much, but that it's genuinely starting to captivate him again, stating that it smells like war, and commenting that Korea seems to be a very interesting country. The company's CEO gives the order to activate the drones. Following this order, a van is shown in an alley and another in a parking lot, both surrounded by combat drones. All of the drones had bombs attached to their bodies. INSIC says that, unlike the previous war, they will no longer need to limit themselves to small-caliber weapons. He laughs, claiming that they are mercenaries, so as long as there is money, there are no rules, ensuring that they win every battle. As a car speeds down a highway, Inju asks the SEO if his men are on guard, desperately pleading with him to confirm it properly. The guy tells him to relax, assuring him that the director must be more protected than the president, since 70% of his men are surveillance. He starts kicking the driver's seat, prompting the bald man to say that, recalling being stabbed in a public sauna, and orders them to just keep an eye on the surroundings, claiming that psychopath threatened to hunt him down. The protagonist was inside a car. Inju senses this and says that Vendetta is getting closer. Taea mentally says that having installed trackers on all of the director's cars was something that was worth it. Additionally, he is worried about how Grai and the others will handle things in the district, claiming that he needs to finish that soon. In one of the security cars, a guard warns the driver that the assassin is right behind them. The guy asks how that crazy guy knew they were there. As he prepares to shoot, the half of his men are beheaded. When he finally looks back, the rest are also killed extremely quickly. He has defeated all of them in a matter of moments. Soldier asks how feared this Vendetta guy is. With that, he sends a burst of gunfire through the windshield towards the driver. Somehow, the protagonist manages to survive without being hit. However, his car seems to lose control. The guard alerts the others that the black sedan behind them is the target. A bus pulls up alongside Taea's vehicle, surprising her. While they order everyone to remain vigilant, and several soldiers prepare their rifles at the window, declaring that they won't give him a chance to breathe. However, the protagonist slams quickly on the brakes as he hurls himself towards the barrier. He tears off one of the doors as he leaps from the car, using it as a makeshift board on the asphalt. Obviously, his car flips over further ahead. He glances back, frightened, trying to figure out his next move. After all, in addition to the numerous cars, 2 motorcycles carrying armed soldiers were approaching, so he uses the door to knock one of them down, then jumps and delivers a knee strike that shatters the other guard's helmet. He quickly finishes them both off and steals one of the motorcycles for himself. Accelerating at full speed to catch up with the director, one of the escort vehicles was, for some reason, a truck equipped with a car ramp. One of the guards announces that he has him in sight, ordering his companions to open fire. Like Neo from the Matrix, he dodges all the bullets, entering their blind spot and heading straight for the ramp, realizing it's time to play GTA and accelerating even more to gain momentum before jumping over the truck. Still in the air, he's already preparing for his next move. Udaz skillfully leaps from the motorcycle towards another vehicle, landing on top of one of the guards' cars. He carefully gets up and stands, taking a deep breath to prepare himself, grabbing his 2 tagas in his hands, and declaring that the fun starts now. The guy notices that he suffered a small cut on his waist. Nervous, he sees that it was thanks to the protective vests. As he tries to attack the protagonist, the bald man calls him a little bug. Since they couldn't risk hitting their own companions, the guards could only watch the protagonist. Noticing that he wasn't even armed, the crazed guards decided to speed up, stating that as soon as he was positioned sideways in the car, they could crush him. Obviously, Taea could hear the engine revving. He raised his head, listening intently and waiting for the opportune moment. So Vendetta only made a small jump to remove himself from the car's support. As a result, he headed straight towards the bus. The protagonist quickly prepared to enter through the windshield, taking advantage of the guard's confusion and inability to process what had just happened. So he broke the glass and entered the vehicle. The soldiers, obviously, did not expect anything like that, so they could barely react in time. Capitalizing on the situation, Vendetta quickly launched a fatal attack. He moved like a brutal hurricane among them, literally, disconnecting all the heads of his opponents. With that done, he broke the window separating him from the driver and sat next to him. Obviously, the guy didn't know what to do in that situation. He could barely. Reasoning about how a motorcyclist, who until recently was flying, could have arrived there, Taea handed over some money, apologized, and asked if he could speed up a little more, assuring him that it wouldn't take long. It was reported that drones had been confirmed within a 600 meters radius of the district, with claims that 16 of them had been sighted. GRY warned that they had separated to reach them at a lower altitude. Furthermore, based on their speed, they appeared to be FPVs. Suwon stated that it was exactly what they had expected. Hours earlier, Zuri had asked the major how the last war had been fought. The man reported that Chan and Ocean only fought at predetermined times. She found it ironic, since they weren't in medieval Europe. However, she inquired as to why the war. However, the boy tells him not to think that he is the only one who has something to say. He quickly lands another slash on his opponent's backside, launching an attack that splits him in two. Had been contained within the district. After all, whenever one of them left, the other did the same. The major explained that only small arms were used, and that only pickaxes were used. They used that method because the two groups didn't want to attract attention. After all, if a monster like that were to appear again, no one would survive to see another day. With that thought, the girl became pensive. Thoughtful for a moment, Suwon explained that this was why the PK tried to finish everything before it reached Ocean's radar, even though taking the district would take a long time. The boy finally understood the reason why. What the drones were carrying. The aide said that they were probably equipped with RPGs or self-destruct grenades, warning them that they needed to prepare themselves. The drones began to fly over the region. Some soldiers spotted them and prepared to fire anti-drone weapons to shoot them down. With this, some of the drones began to stop in mid-air. One of the soldiers celebrated the success. Another one of them fired his rifle while cursing the mercenaries. The bald man was informed that they had lost control of the drones on the 1st and 7th streets. Assuming the enemy might possess an anti-drone weapon, Insik inquired about the basis for that hypothesis. His subordinate explained that the signal loss was only occurring in specific locations. Obviously, the CO became enraged, questioning whether the Yaburi even possessed radar systems. Furthermore, he argued that anti-drone technology wasn't that widespread. Laughing, he confidently stated that it wouldn't be enough to stop them. Suddenly, Gry was incredibly surprised and taken aback. They scrambled to understand what was happening with the drones, reporting that there were a large number of them, estimating at least 100. Insik, he questioned if they genuinely believed their company would initiate a war with a mere 10 or 20 drones. He explained that anti-drone measures only block a small area, and the signal returns when they are directed elsewhere. Closer, the boy notices that she has several wounds all over her body, which paralyzes him, as he doesn't know what to do in that situation. Still, the boy keeps trying to wake her up. However, as he falls apart, Hank wonders what that was, not understanding how that man could do such a thing, complaining about who that monster really is. On the other hand, the protagonist, now, with hundreds of drones scattered across the sky, the man wondered just how many they would be able to stop. Considering the previous war, which led to the reconstruction of the majority of the district's buildings, a simple command allows drones to be deployed anywhere. The SEO stated he was eager to see how many would survive with 800 explosive drones on their tail. Someone issued a warning over the radio that the drones were infiltrating through the ventilation system, warning that they seemed to know the house's layout. Suen ordered everyone to evacuate, claiming those drones were already programmed, so there was no way to stop them. Smiling, the older man assured them that the boss was already on her way. Someone called the bald man, telling him there was something strange in the sky. Insik looked up, confused. The sky seemed normal as always. However, unexpectedly, several lights appeared and grew increasingly intense. Following this, multiple explosions began to occur. In one of the buildings, facing the drones, was Z, trying to get the attention of everyone he could. He quickly manipulated his threads and completely wound them up, causing them to stop in their tracks. So he jumped away while blowing them up. He became upset and asked who that was, assuring everyone that something like that had never happened during the last war. Some time ago, his subordinates were asking what that was all about. She apologized for not telling them sooner, stating that this was her true weapon. The girl then said maybe they were, surprised, but as she had said before, she was somewhere else during the last war, explaining that she was learning to use that weapon to help her father, but fate dictated that it arrived too late. That's why she wanted to make things right this time, stating that they would make sure those scoundrels never set foot in their neighborhood again. Sueon felt proud and asked Gisob. He didn't seem happy about it. He starts cleaning his daggers as he walks away, heading towards a luxury car and grabbing a bag from the back seat. This continues until to see how much his daughter had grown. The bald man ordered more units to be brought in, ordering them to overwhelm the enemy with numbers and to obliterate everyone in their path. However, when his soldier tried to respond, something seemed to surprise him. Suddenly, someone rammed the van from behind. Someone informed Hwarion that there had to be a command center for the drones nearby. The big guy claimed they were right, which made the SEO nervous. The tank headed towards the bald man, declaring that he would take care of him first. 10 years ago, the guy questioned whether his friend really wanted to form a gang. He argued that times were changing and that, instead of paying some gang for protection, it was easier to create their own. The older man says that he is still a soldier, and besides, there is no one there who is as good at fighting as Gazeo. However, the guy assures him that he won't meet just to beat anyone up. It's just a way to facilitate negotiations. With a smile, he asks his friend what he thinks of the name Yaburi. Returning to the present, the mercenaries were wondering how Waryonga had found that place. The soldiers warn that Alpha Team has identified a threat. The large man runs faster and faster, lowering his head to avoid the shots. Annoyed, their captain orders them to stop aiming for the head and instead target the feet. However, the tank had already crushed one of them against the wall. His partner couldn't believe what was happening. With that, the large man quickly strikes the second mercenary, also throwing him against the wall, already unconscious. A sniper reports that the Alpha Team's threat is in his sights. The guy admits that this man is a monster. However, before he could do anything, his body is completely sliced through. As expected, this was the trunk, where he's writhing in pain. The director begs Tae to let him go, insisting that he was only following orders. He reveals that it was former lawyer King, the one who ordered his death, claiming that he had no done by the girl. She runs quickly across the rooftops. Insik notices this and curses her furiously. She informs everyone that she just eliminated another sniper. Sueon congratulates her on her work and warns her that there will likely be more, asking her to remain vigilant. Furthermore, they were unaware of her existence, so the snipers probably they are positioned in locations with good downward visibility, and the area where the snipers are grouped is likely the same location where the drones are stationed. GR warns that he has located the likely location. He confirms that it's in a black van, in a public parking lot across from the community center. The girl acknowledges that she understands and is already on her way there, but something catches her attention. After all, Jwaryong had been shot. However, his nickname isn't Tank for nothing. The guy didn't even have a scratch. As she approached, the guy says that in those last 20 years of bloodshed, he survived as a mercenary in that country, in his own way. Insik assures her that he will kill the girl. After finishing them all off first, tearing off his coat, the guy reveals his robotic arm, claiming that he will finish off the bald guy right then and there. Elsewhere, a car falls off a viaduct. Luckily, it doesn't flip over when it reaches the road below. The director was on his knees in front of the protagonist, calling him crazy and questioning what Vendetta wanted from him and why he was doing all of this. However, the guy says he already told him that he plans to stab him once a day, plunging his knife into the guy's shoulder. Inju asks if Tae is crazy for doing something like that for such a stupid reason. The protagonist takes out his cell phone, stating that it would be very difficult to find him if he went abroad, so he will take him to the district. However, reason to kill the president. However, the boy opens the bag and throws a bunch of bills at the man, telling him that this is the million. After all, that money shouldn't have been. The director repeats that it is already too late, assuring him that at this hour, that neighborhood no longer has anyone on its streets, declaring that he ordered his men to exterminate everyone, including children and the elderly, telling them not to discriminate, and informing them that he spent over 100 billion won, asking if the boy even comprehends what that means, saying that they must destroy everything within an hour, using bombs, missiles, or any means they deem necessary. The protagonist mentions hearing that many people died in the previous war. Upon getting caught in the conflict between the two gangs, she claims that, apparently, the guy still doesn't understand why she will only go after him. She asserts that there is no one more deadly than someone who has lost their loved ones. Family, since those people have nothing left to lose, and therefore risk everything without fear. However, There is a group of people even stronger than them, those who have a family to protect. With this, the director recalls that day in the hospital. Ta says he is certain that the director, too, has seen the eyes of someone willing to do anything to protect his family. With agony tearing through their lungs and fury destroying their hearts, they are all trapped, their labored breathing promising revenge. Those people are strong, and the one who made them that way is none other than himself. So, the protagonist tells him to shut up and asks him to follow silently. However, Inju asks if the boy truly believes that things like family and revenge are stronger than money. Back in Juarian's fight, the mercenary admits that he never imagined that he was a former Oseon, the 16th in command of the gang, during the last war. While dodging the shots, the big guy says that's in the past and swings his axe. Insik asks his opponent not to underestimate him, assuring him that everyone delivered to him. Terrified, the guy asks what money Taea is talking about. However, the director then remembers that day. The protagonist pulls a lighter out of his jacket, stating that knows what the ranking signifies. Anyone in Ocean's top 20 is considered one of the strongest in the nation. Suddenly, Z's threads emerge in the middle of the battle. The girl quickly manages to completely wrap up the bald man while he curses at her. The guy wonders what kind of thread it is that he can't even cut through. She states her name, claiming that she found out that he was the one who killed the most people in her entire city. Cursing him, Zuri vows to take his head to soothe the sad hearts of everyone who's been left behind. With this, Zhong jumps towards him to deliver the final blow. SEO tries to beg them to wait. However, luckily for him, Jerome appears and saves him from there. This obviously surprises the big guy, and not unlike him, Zuri doesn't understand what just happened either. The guy claims that the reason the bald guy is in that situation is because he chose toys like drones to win. Taking a Wong lever, the assassin asks if he is wrong, looking directly at the two of them. The man states that he will start, still confused by the situation. The girl wonders if the man is a new enemy. Note that even though Insik was completely entangled in his wires, that guy got him out of it like it was nothing. The leader of the mercenaries wonders what that guy was doing showing up so late. So late, however, Jaron only says that his base is 350 meters to the northwest, on the 4th floor of a ruined building, and orders the bald man to leave. Before he could even finish the sentence, Juarian pushes the assassin against the wall. However, the tank seems surprised by something. After all, the man was laughing as he said he'd stay there for a while to enjoy himself. Insik shouts desperately into the radio, ordering all drones to be launched. His subordinate tries to object, claiming that they don't even know where the enemies, thanks to dying that day, he has been reborn, as he throws the lighter. With that, Kim begins to burn alive. Tae coldly watches it all with indifference. Control center is. Nevertheless, his leader tells him that there is no problem, since their best man is there, and orders everyone to be killed. While Jaron keeps the man busy, Zuri, he tells the man that he can't do something like that. This distracts the big guy for a moment, creating an opening for the assassin to kick him and send him flying. Juyeon obviously has something. He has difficulty stopping himself. Nervously, he admits that he didn't expect the man to be able to throw 120 kilograms that far, noting that, based on his physique, that's not all of his strength. The big guy thinks that guy. It's really promising. The girl calls her friend. However, he tells his boss not to worry, assuring her that he will take care of things there. The girl says she will handle the drones, asking him to take that man down and bring him to the base. She says that's an order, telling him to finish things within the next 5 minutes, because if the spikes arrive before then, it will be the end. Without. However, Warong suddenly becomes very scared by something. After all, Jerome appears next to the girl, asking if she's already leaving and requesting her to stay a little longer, claiming that it will be more fun. However, the large man appears, preparing to strike him, delivering a powerful blow to the assassin and sending him flying. The man repeats his request to leave things to him, ensuring that he will catch up to her soon. The girl simply nods. With that, she starts running as fast as possible. Juarong mentally admits that if she had hesitated, he would have insulted her until she left. Surprised that she isn't losing her composure, despite this being her first war, he states that it must be in her blood. However, Jerome starts laughing, wondering if that isn't a surprise, assuming that if he receives a few more hits like that, he really might end up dead. The big guy complains about how he survived a direct hit. Okay, take it easy. Placing the cigarette in his mouth, the protagonist mentally tries to speak with his parents and grandfather, asking for forgiveness for taking so long, and praying that they won't. Right in the chest, wondering where that guy came from. His opponent tells him that he is from the Philippines, informing him that he learned Korean out of pure interest, and asks him how he's doing. Pronunciation. They stand face to face, staring each other down. Jerome confesses that his life has felt dull recently, claiming he misses fighting, and things of that nature. He introduces himself, stating that the two of them will have a lot of fun. With that, the guy punches Juwari in the face. As expected, Juwari retaliates by preparing another punch. He also introduces himself by launching a series of attacks, all over the enemy's body, taking advantage of an opening to deliver an uppercut. The assassin declares that he loves it. Logically, a blow like that makes Juarong dizzy. Before he can regain his senses, the psychopath delivers another blow. Even while taking hits, the large man remembers someone who discovered his identity. Thinking back to the protagonist, he affirms that he trusted his abilities and that he would leave everything in his hands while he was away. Clenching his fist, he wonders why that man would trust his abilities, recalling that, during the First World War, in that district, he was the main squad leader of the Oseon gang in his younger days, and Jaisub was the boss of Yaburi, a close friend who had worked with him in the gang before retiring. At that moment, he asked his friend to trust him, assuring him that he would make sure everyone moved into an apartment with a spectacular view. However, Suri's father says that most of the people there are elderly, so they can't wait a whole decade just to live there again. He says that he will fight, and if he dies trying, at least he will know that he attempted to do something, worry, and instead, find peace, stating that he will take on all their suffering from this day forward. After a while, a modern building stood out from the others in the middle of the city. However, before anything else, he asked him for a favor, saying that if he dies, he would leave everything that follows in his hands. However, the truth he uncovered only brought him despair, a world overflowing with talent that loomed over him like insurmountable mountains. After reaching 16th place, the man he realized that he had reached the limit of his abilities. However, his friend's death revealed something he hadn't realized before, admitting that what truly made him stronger wasn't the mountains, but the people he needed to protect. Jurong relentlessly attacked him, but surprisingly, Joryanga grabbed the assassin's head and charged forward, carrying him close, declaring that he's known as a tank for a reason, proclaiming that he's the one who paves the way for others to follow. His enemy seemed taken aback by the sudden change and smiled. The stranger remarked that fist is full of conviction, admitting that he initially thought they were just playing around. Appearing behind him, the guy says that if the man is truly serious about this, he will also have to do the same. Grabbing the lever, Jerome admits that it was fun, saying that this will make Juwari depart painlessly. Juwari is completely paralyzed with shock at this. A large slash cuts through him horizontally, also cutting the wall in front of him, causing it to begin to fall. Someone praises the man for all of his hard work. Unexpectedly, Taea appears and cuts through the wall, preventing it from falling on him. The protagonist asks Juan to let him handle this, thanking him again for all his work. With that, he turns his gaze. He looked at Jerome, facing him head-on. The murderer says that vendetta is the boy declares that from here on, he will be his opponent. But first, Taea asks if his partner can move. The protagonist moved quickly, determined to do something. Some men questioned where he thought he was going as they prepared to shoot in order to stop him, still with those injuries. Visibly bearing several deep cuts, Huanong insists that it wasn't enough, claiming that he is fine and assuring them that they would have to kill him to make him stop. Move. So the protagonist asks him to walk 1 block, informing him that a black car will be near a pole. Ino will be waiting for him inside the trunk, and he will take care of things there, asking the man to guide the car to his hideout. Giron asks if they really think he'll let the big guy go that easily. However, Taea throws a manhole cover towards his foot. As expected, the guy simply defends against it. The protagonist begins to walk towards his opponent, smiling. The madman asks if he's serious, quickly using his crowbar to catch the manhole cover. Still in the air, he deftly throws it back, becoming more and more excited. Vendetta runs towards him as fast as possible, barely managing to dodge it. They both stop, maintaining some distance between them. However, Sharon launches an attack, appearing increasingly thirsty for adrenaline. The protagonist says that, apparently, this guy was really going around claiming to be his rival. The weirdo asks if that's not the truth, and with that, they begin exchanging blows at an absurd speed. However, Taea says that this guy is nothing more than a stalker, but the killer continues laughing, claiming that it's all the same thing. Several explosions erupt in the sky. Sue was eliminating all of the drones she could. Exhausted, the girl admits that there are too many drones there, and that she can't waste too much time on them. Suddenly, they hear over the radio that headquarters is exchanging fire with the Pika, approximately 50 meters from the base. Dry says that the situation is dangerous, but their position makes it difficult for the enemies to approach, asking them not to worry. However, the madman simply kills them both quickly. Still, Taea didn't seem bothered by the unforeseen event, and continues walking calmly through the hall. Seeing this situation, stating that as soon as that man returns, this war will be over, so they just need to hold out until then. The girl, hearing those words, wonders if he might be talking about someone in particular. With that, he hears the sound of a car. Inside the trunk was the director. Although incredibly injured, Juan went to help him. Obviously, the guy was increasingly more and more afraid of what fate might have in store for him. The large man grabs his face as if he were a doll. He wondered if the only way to end the war was to crush that German's skull right then and there. However, if that man loses, Sur won't be able to face Jerome alone, and he considers that it might be better to ask the Ocean for help. With that, he starts to squeeze Injo's face tighter and tighter, saying to himself that he is to blame for everything, and that after his death, Pick and Jerome will have to retreat. However, Taea and his opponent continue to fight above him. The assassin was holding back the protagonist's blades. They both begin to clash their weapons again, coming face to face and glaring at each other once more. They exchange another frenzied series of blows. Vendetta manages to land a kick to his enemy's stomach, sending him flying. The man uses his crowbar as leverage to stop himself. Getting up, he admits he was surprised to find his rival in Korea, but claims he might be starting to understand why he came here, destroying the air conditioner he jammed the tip of his crowbar into. He leaves the protagonist surprised by saying that, for assassins like them, that place is a paradise. Attempting to strike him with it, Jerome asks if Vendetta doesn't agree. Clearly, the boy is having some difficulty escaping the attack. As a last resort, Taea jumps backward and crashes through an apartment. However, his opponent was already anticipating this, laughing maniacally as he tries to strike him again. Large wave heads towards them, causing the protagonist to begin to drown. Desperate, the boy realizes that he needs to get to the surface before he runs out of air. Opening his eyes, he sees man sits on the ground, terrified by the scene. Frightened, he asks the protagonist who sent him. The guy says that they are part of the Cheongu Group, stating that he won't be. Suan asks if Gray is certain that everything will be over once that man arrives. The boy replies that he is absolutely sure, leaving the older man bewildered, questioning who he is and why they have so much faith in him. Gray asks if the assistant recalls the news referring to the Cheongu family as royalty, reporting that the terrorist was Taea. However, he asks him to disregard what he just heard, asserting that he isn't actually a terrorist who murdered the royal family, because even though he has gone, that man is still part of that royal family, stating that calling him the heir to the throne makes more sense. In her head, Vendetta remembers the first time their paths crossed. Both were in England and shared the same objective. Suddenly, a large explosion erupts in the walls of the tunnel. The protagonist and Jerome were fighting, and the guy had fallen onto the middle of the train tracks. He leans on his crowbar. Looking down, he seems surprised to realize that his legs had been completely broken, preventing him from escaping, and the train, he was getting closer. The guy even looks around, hoping for some help from Taea. However, the boy does nothing, claiming he was sure he had killed him at that moment. But then, time passes, and a cargo plane crosses the skies. Two people begin to fall. The protagonist recalls a time when he was dealing with a traitor who was trying to escape to Russia. It was then that they crossed paths again, fighting in mid-air. They begin to exchange blows while free-falling, until Vendetta manages to hit his vest, cutting off the parachute release, placing his foot on his chest and pushing him down. However, he didn't die that time either. On the contrary, Jerome seems to be getting stronger after each confrontation. The madman continues. Sure, after doing all that. While cleaning his blade, Taea explains that the group is Holdings, a private security firm, subcontracted by Cheongu, whose primary function is to laughing, stating that the protagonist's blow wasn't enough, claiming that it was due to a very subtle difference, noting that the blows with his right hand are weaker than those from his left. With that, Jerome quickly advances against Taea, saying that Vendetta failed to kill him despite having several opportunities, including with that last hit. The guy lands an attack, fiercely powerful. The protagonist realizes that his right arm began to tremble after the attack, since it was the one that broke during his revenge. Taking advantage of this brief distraction, the madman appears from behind him, questioning if a guy of his caliber really hurt his arm. The boy manages to escape the attack, while his opponent says that after his brief experience in that country, he can even understand the protagonist, Jerome says it would be crazy to assume that place isn't full of good fighters after creating a lawless environment by killing to the president. He claims that, even so, the best of all is still vendetta, since he is the only one who has left him on the brink of death, making him stronger and stronger each time. The guy starts cutting. The water box is pierced by the tip of the crowbar, creating a large gash in its structure, and that piece is launched towards his opponent. Taea has no time to react, as the assassin leaps. Preparing to deliver the final blow, he exploits the enemy's vulnerability, unleashing an incredibly powerful attack that kicks up a cloud of smoke. He then lands on the ground, quietly. However, much to his surprise, the protagonist is gone, and he wonders how the boy managed to escape the attack. He begins to tremble with rage, insisting that he clearly saw him get hit. Being hit, realizing that he can easily disappear from his sight, he defends against one of the daggers his opponent threw. Chiron declares that vendetta has failed once again and missed another. Protect directors and board members outside of working hours throughout the Ganpuk area. During their off time, they stalk journalists or individuals who have reported on opportunity. However, the protagonist interrupts his speech, assuring him that this time, he will make sure to finish him off. By the time the blade finally falls to the ground, Taea is already standing in front of his opponent. The man was bewildered, unable to comprehend what had just happened, and wondering if his rival had always been this fast. The assassin vendetta unleashes a slash that tears everything around him in half. Taea declares that she is his equal, stating that she too grew up facing death, and finishes off her rival right then and there. Meanwhile, Zuri was running desperately through the buildings. Desperately, she says that according to the radio, this is the last batch of drones, and insists that she needs to take them all down as quickly as possible and return to base. The girl is confused when she sees two men carrying a body. One of them notices her presence. Paralyzed, she wonders if these are more enemies. However, the man says her name, claiming to be a special forces unit from the Ocean gang. As they state that they are under the orders of their Captain Wyming, he himself appears before the protagonist. He informs her that he received orders to kill her, asking Taea what he should do. They both stare at each other after that unusual question. The protagonist remembers it and also questions how he knew his location. He realizes that he must not be one of Injo's men. Besides, if he wanted to kill him, the guy would have ambushed him and not revealed himself. The boy says he thought he was special, stating that apparently he is part of Ocean. Wim asks if he wants some thanks or anything like that, claiming that he should know that he can't make a mess here. Taea says the guy probably didn't get the whole story, but he assures that he wasn't the one who made the first move. When both of them were about to start discussing it in detail, the madman starts to rise like a zombie behind him. This obviously makes them both freeze. Cheongu. Following that, they kidnap and assault their targets, even killing them. In other words, they are essentially hired assassins. The people who had been captured were completely devastated, completely still with difficulty. Jerome admits that was serious. Logically, Vendetta grabs his other dagger that had fallen on the ground. However, the corpse manages to dodge it. The guy pulls a grenade out of his pocket, throws it, and says he'll see his friend another time. The other two are hit by the explosion. The protagonist scans the area with his eye, trying to find him. He starts walking, wanting to chase after the zombie. However, Winnie stops the boy. She asks him to wait a minute, stating that Tae must keep a cool head. Order. However, Vendetta is obviously irritated by this, and swings his dagger. The protagonist argues that the zombie was first in line, but his opponent easily stops the attack. He realizes that the guy predicted his move. Weeman admits that he can't see at that ridiculous speed. However, it would be humiliating to be fooled by the same trick twice. The captain states that, from what he can see, the boy is in no condition to fight, and questions why he doesn't try being nice at least once. He admits that the guy has always seemed strong, but he is someone promising who hasn't yet reached their full potential. In that case, whining must be someone capable of forcing certain things to happen within the band. They both distance themselves from each other. The protagonist says that he had noticed this before, but considering his skills, his opponent doesn't seem to have blood on his hands. He asks if he is right to claim that Weeman has never killed anyone so far. The man tries to hit him, however, Taea disappears, leaving the guy surprised. The protagonist was already behind him, smiling as he observes him. However, surprising the boy, the captain also increases his speed, while claiming that he has beaten many people into pools of blood. Seeing that, Vendetta is desperate. The protagonist simply throws one of his daggers at the man. After that, he instructs everyone to use it to free themselves and to make sure they never saw him there. So, surprised by that ferocity. Still, he dodges the blow. He tells the guy to go to the third floor of the abandoned building 450 meters northwest of there, informing him that it is his and the others' hiding place. Residence, stating that even if Wyming can't kill him, he'll gain a worthwhile reward. But when he turns around, the man realizes that everyone is gone, leaving only him in the middle of it all. Ali, huffing with rage as he declares he's fed up with that brat. The 3rd District was completely silent. The Ocean Gang's Special Forces unit speaks over the radio, ordering everyone to pay attention. To pay attention, he orders them to surrender, or their squad will destroy every single one of them. The announcement was repeated once more as Insiga took cover to avoid being hit by the phased shots. He curses, seeing his dead soldiers on the staircase. He complains, wondering if the Ocean Gang had also planted spies in that location, just as they had. Gray remained, hiding in another room, asking if the older one was okay, and pleading with him not to faint. Although struggling to breathe, Suan tells the boy to speak more quietly, saying that they might discover their locations if they do that. The radio announced that 2 individuals were found in the hideout. However, there were many soldiers in the nearby buildings, which made the area dangerous. His subordinate asks why they aren't retreating, insisting that it will be difficult with the Oceans present. However, Insig silences him. Obviously, the mercenary leader could only think about the money, claiming that opportunities like these only come once in a lifetime. The older man speaks to the bald man, saying that, apparently, he wants to see this through to the end. The guy claims that if they manage to kill Giseo, Jerome will take care of everything else. However, he just needs to finish things there. He goes on to say that he will kill the leader of Yabari. With his creating detections, they cut their bonds. The 3 of them were still confused by everything that had just transpired. The man gets up and attempts to return the knife to the boy. As they flee, they express their gratitude. Own hands. However, a hand silently approaches him, freezing him with fear. That person covers his mouth. It was Huanong, who questioned whether he had really just, declaring that their lives were worth 10 billion won. Turning around quickly, the bald man claims that the guy must be nothing more than a walking corpse at this point. However, the big guy, he walks away, saying he'll make him spit out every last drop of blood, insisting it's for everyone he killed. He lands a punch to the chest, causing the mercenary leader to vomit a large amount of blood. The force of the blow was so strong that it sent him flying out of the building. The mercenaries in the building across from them are frightened by this, but before they could do anything, some cables appear. With that, they begin to be strangled. While jumping, Sir manages to easily decapitate them. On the other hand, Insik died from the fall. While running, the girl realizes that it's finally all over. After that, 5 minutes pass. Weemin finally arrived at the building the protagonist had sent him to. Upon entering, in one of the rooms, the guy asks, "What's that?" At a makeshift table, Taea invites the man to join them. The boy then comments that, at that table, there's the representative of the 3rd District, a representative from the Cheongu Inu, and finally, a spokesperson for the Ocean Gang, indicating that all the important parties are present. The protagonist announces that they will officially negotiate the district's redevelopment rights, stating that everyone should leave satisfied, even though they are in the Yabari base building. Yabari. Someone tells their boss that they don't know how to put it, claiming that they weren't deceived. He says he doesn't feel like the right person to speak there, and asks if his boss could assist him. Meanwhile, the company member orders everyone to return. One of the fleeing individuals glances back, hearing the man's complaints. The fat man was asking who it was, wondering if. As someone approaches, the guy tells the old man to stop complaining so much. He takes a deep breath after hanging up the phone and pulls out a cigarette. With that, Taea offers him her lighter, saying, "It must be difficult to work until that late." Wim comments that apparently, the boy has started carrying his own cigarettes. The protagonist asks if he still hasn't gotten over that, questioning if he wants one in return, but he simply refuses. The captain admits that he wasn't confident about his victory in the last fight, saying that applies to many of his future battles. However, he claims that if he gets the opportunity to fight 3 more times, he guarantees that he will defeat him. The boy just watches him silently, irritating the guy. Vendetta comments that it's a shame he only has 1 life. With that said, one of them finishes smoking his cigarette. As the protagonist withdraws, Wim asks him how he can be alive and well after facing Junsu. To Junsu, he says he won't tell him anything there, declaring that whether he wants to or not, the guy will know everything the next time they meet. The captain smiles, saying that the boy never gives answers. Direct. He says he wants to see if Tae will act the same way with the man who's about to show up. After a while, back at the abandoned building, Women returns with 2 more men, including Japil. As he enters, Shuang immediately bows to greet them. He introduces himself as the former leader of Group B in the Incheon branch and expresses his regret that the vice president had to come all the way there. The man says it's been a while since he last saw him, noticing that he has some injuries. However, the guy says that fortunately, he doesn't have any problems moving around. Jae-pil claims that he's apparently the troublemaker there, asking them to drop the formalities since Juwon is no longer part of the gang. He tells him not to bow to others. Taea is revealed to be part of her family as she removes her mask. The boy denies it, explaining that he simply wanted a more private conversation, stating that he needs the agenda of so easily, saying that he didn't let him go that peacefully just to be received like that. Even Wim can sense the strange atmosphere. The big guy admits that it's already surprising to see the 7th, but he never imagined seeing the second in command there. He was the one who transformed the gang into an organization integrated into the political system. When he was appointed vice president, he unleashed a rampage, admitting that the guy always led them to victory, where violence wasn't even an option. Assuming that he's even more troublesome than Cheongu, everyone falls silent. As they hear his footsteps approaching, Jae-pil introduces himself and says that before they start, he has a few topics he would like to address. Ino was still tied up, mumbling non-stop. Jae-pil requests that they untie the director, stating that he refuses to negotiate until then. Unlike Z, who is furious, the protagonist simply says that the man is a criminal who broke the agreement. Taea was going to say something else, but the man tells him to shut up. He asserts that the boy is an outsider who shouldn't even be there, assuring them that if he says one more word, he will leave. With that, he must remain silent. The man orders the director to be released again, while Women smiles at his superior's attitude. Since he couldn't speak, the boy simply gestures to the girl. She does, as he asked. Jae-pil says there's a car waiting for him outside and orders the guy to go first. Inu begins to retreat, assuring them that he will pay his debt and telling everyone to wait. He promises to make their deaths as painless as possible. Suri was obviously furious about all of this. The girl asks what the old man's problem is, stating that he would be betrayed by the manager and still acted that way. However, Jae-pil asks how he's supposed to believe everything they've said. That leaves her even more confused and outraged, questioning how he can everyone on the council, from the directors to the president. The guy claims he doesn't know, and even if he did, he wouldn't reveal it, as he and his family would be killed if he did. Know if it really was a violation of the agreement, or just some kind of internal conflict between the two of them. He slams the table, claiming that the director held his father hostage, the man who was almost killed by the third best subordinate of them. Looking at the protagonist, the guy asks if he was the one who stabbed Injal, which obviously leaves her speechless, as she assures him that even if the director was really threatening his people, there would still be no reason for war. So, after they provoked and threatened that man using a stranger, their duty there is to hold both of them responsible for breaking the contract. After that, Jae-pil asks if they have any evidence strong enough to refute their claims. Visibly, the protagonist was furious and wanted to kill them. On the other hand, Suri says that, in that case, they no longer have any interest in negotiating with the Ocean gang. The guy retorts that the decision is no longer in the girl's hands, since they accepted the terms of the agreement but then violated them. The representative warns that they will send a proposal within 24 hours and informs them that they will have 24 more hours to respond. Thus, the three of them leave as normal. Suri, extremely irritated and trembling, kicks the table. The girl says she couldn't even say everything she wanted to, declaring that Jae-pil had no intention of negotiating from the start. Taea simply nods in agreement. She also assumes that there must be a spy among them, since the old man knew everything before they even arrived. The girl looks at the protagonist, asking if at least everything is going according to plan. He says yes, praising her work. On the other hand, the members of Ocean head to the car. Surprisingly, the Sir states that women should go separately, claiming that he doesn't offer a career for cowards who hide at the first sign of defeat. But obviously the captain doesn't like that, saying that the protagonist observes that he apparently values his life, stating that he'll start with his eye and that when he feels ready, he should raise his hand. In one building, a large screen outside displayed a. He explained exactly what was going on, stating that women is still young and asking what he expected. However, Jae-pil paid no attention and continued on his way. Nevertheless, someone intercepts his car. As expected, it was the protagonist. The car slowly approached him. Opening the window slightly, Jae-pil asks, "What do you want?" The boy replies that since the two gangs are being part of a larger power structure, it's important that they don't overstep certain boundaries. So, If they lose the director who was released because Cheongu recently lost his president, they will become more fragile, causing the agreement between them to weaken even further, and the person and the reason behind the disappearance remain a mystery. Surely, for someone who didn't need to negotiate with a stranger, he now has excellent reasons to at least discuss this much. With that, Japel recalls what he said at the meeting, remembering Juarong. The guy realizes that he wasn't waiting for him, but was waiting for the director's release. The man admits that he expected the boy to come after him, but upon realizing that it's not as foolish as he thought, he's now at a loss for what to think. The old man completely changes his behavior, mentioning that he has an available spot and asking if the boy would like to join him. However, the protagonist replies that they aren't that well acquainted, stating that they just need to settle things simply. Japil assures him that he wouldn't have set a trap so late in the game, and mentions that he only knows of an excellent cigar lounge. Tae remarks that this only complicates matters further, as he is extremely particular about his cigars. The man says that he heard he was out of Korea for a while, and asks where he had been living until then. The boy replies that he was in Italy. The old man says that, although he is not several bodies scattered beneath the ship, becoming increasingly astonished by the entire scene, noticing that even his secretary was shot dead, including the chef, the news story related to some celebrity. In stark contrast, several homeless people were sitting on a staircase. Due to the intense heat, even a cicada lay dead on the ground. Familiar with them, the place he's talking about also carries cigars, and tries to recall the name. Before the man can finish his sentence, the crazy man jumps into the car, declaring that, "I should have mentioned something like that from the start." Japel is slightly surprised by the killer's reaction, and informs him that the speed limit in Seoul is 50 kilometers per hour, but Taea tells him to, "Don't worry about it, and just hurry." After that, they arrive at the location mentioned. A white-haired man approaches them and informs them that those are the cigars the man usually smokes. In addition, he also brought the ones he had ordered. The man says that he will appreciate them, as always. The waiter wishes them to enjoy their time. However, before he leaves, Taea calls out, asking if they have matches. The waiter confirms and asks if he should bring them over. It was a high-end establishment with incredibly expensive drinks. The boy says, "That's not a typical cigar made with a Kentucky blend, valued by laborers and other classes, and known for its considerable length, which is sometimes cut in half to share with companions," giving a portion to Japel. He explains that this is why it's called the cigar of friendship. Slightly surprised, the man accepts it, mentioning that it takes about half an hour to an hour to smoke a cigar. Entire, noticing that Taea wants a conversation lasting no more than 15 minutes. With that, they both fall silent for a moment. The old man admits that the cigar doesn't seem so bad, and also admits that he doesn't care what happens in the 3rd District, as matters like those don't interest him. Therefore, he reveals the real reason he showed up there. Firstly, Weeman doesn't yet know how to handle situations like that. Secondly, he didn't understand how someone capable of facing Cheongu royalty ended up in a place like that. The protagonist recounts that, breaking the silence, someone seems to be in a hurry. As he walks, Tae thinks a cigarette would attract unwanted attention, wondering if he should try Korean cigarettes. He almost died that time, assuring him that he's alive thanks to the people there, and requests that the man offer the citizens guaranteed housing until the redevelopment plans are complete, providing the necessary relocation assistance for a new apartment that meets Gangnam standards, all without any additional charges. Jail reports that construction alone will cost 3 trillion won. If they provide all of that assistance, the families will receive 10 times the property's value. Tae asks if they aren't there to negotiate, since he was under the impression that the man wanted to know about his plans for Cheongu's future. However, the man denies any such intention, assuring him that he is there for another reason. His true interest lies in the protagonist's knowledge of the committee, the largest conglomerate in South Korea, which controls advanced industries and entertainment businesses throughout the country. Cheongu Company, the criminal organization behind the president's assassination, with rankings based on each member's abilities. Ocean, the pseudo-religious organization with the largest chamber group comprised of all presidents since the assassination. The Everlasting Life Cult, the largest crime syndicate consisting of military elites and media tycoons rejected by Ocean, and the Dovan Association. Lastly, the organizer of the committee, the Cheonju House. Since 1990, these 5 factions have overseen the country through the committee. The only thing they covet is equilibrium, the perfect balance of equally shared power. Hearing this, Taea remains silent, looking a little thoughtful. The protagonist then says that, apparently, they fear that Sean will disrupt that balance. However, Jay Peel assures him that isn't the case, and says that the boy knows the correct answer, asking if Chon was responsible for his near. The avenue was bustling at that hour. He thinks to himself that he's finally back in Korea, and so far everything seems normal, but he notices his country is going crazy, with advertisements for death. However, the protagonist seems to hesitate for a moment, recalling when he confronted Junes, and the moment the old man said everything would end there. Nevertheless, the boy affirms that it was Junsu. The man suddenly says, "Cheol got Junsu," claiming that's what they said the moment they recognized his strength. A man of unknown origin, age, and identity, who assumed the role of the president's bodyguard, stating that Cheongu's very presidency shines thanks to his light. That man first emerged because of a coup, and although he is afraid to believe that thought, maybe Junsu is using the organization to fuel his ambitions. The question is, what is the man looking for by telling him this? Leaning back, Jaipil assures him that he must know, stating that he is sure that the boy knows what he really wants. The protagonist assumes that maybe this man wants him to kill Chol and Junsu. Getting up, Vendetta thanks him for the pure information, warning that he will accept that as an agreement regarding the district matter. The old man says that if anyone outside the committee finds out about that, the rule states that they must be eliminated. This prompts the protagonist not to attempt an escape, as he wants to preserve their connection. The protagonist ceases walking, urging Jaipil to look forward to the upcoming Cheongu Council meeting. Elsewhere, a fax is delivered to an office located on the third floor of Cheongu Electronics. One of the employees wonders who could have sent a fax there. Upon calmly reading the message, he is surprised by its contents. Meanwhile, in a forest-like area near a waterfall, someone is running barefoot across the ground. It is Pyoto, a director and member of the board of directors, attempting to conceal himself while clutching the same message. Calling the vice president, the man reports that Ino has announced her intention to abstain from the vote. Credits and insurance everywhere. A politician was giving a speech, claiming he would use his power and influence to eradicate the epidemic of crime and violence, stating that from that, the old man, who was bathing, freezes, visibly irritated. The man explains that he sent a fax notifying them that a prosecutor will be present. The ugly man inquires as to who. It must have been that prosecutor. "Hello everyone, did you enjoy the story? I certainly loved it. If you want to keep up with the next part, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next one." Story, guys. The street was lined with protest banners, clearly indicating that entry to the building was restricted and that the residents would fight against the demolition. Inside of the coffee shop, the preparation process was detailed, indicating that it involved an espresso machine and a preheated ceramic cup. For the drink, a blend of Arabica and Robusta beans with a dark roast was used, which was ground while the machine hummed gently. Then, drop by drop, a very strong ristretto coffee began to flow from the machine, the dark liquid dripping rhythmically into the cup. The coffee then filled the ceramic cup, and the light foam floating on the surface was the sign of a perfect result. "Yes," he proudly presented. The cups, as he explained that it was an authentic Neapolitan ristretto, its aroma permeating the air. A person with a cap and long hair intently watched the small cup in his bandaged hand. He then lifted the cup and took a small sip of the dark liquid. The other cafe customers reacted with astonishment, considering how hot and extremely bitter the drink was, as the outraged group questioned if he really expected them to drink that, complaining that their throats felt like they were on fire, and questioning if his intention was to kill them. He then explained that he used to have a dose of that drink before going to work for more energy, and that they would soon get used to the taste. Even so, one of them commented, day forward, his war against crime would be publicly declared. However, his speech is interrupted when someone points a gun in his direction. It's mentioned that in 1990, the president was assassinated, that the drink was too bitter, and jokingly asked if adding sugar to coffee would be a crime in Italy. Taea, with her head tilted slightly, answered no. The members of the association were elated, but Jaipil King did not seem very happy with the situation. They should have let him know if they wanted sugar because he hadn't put any in, which seemed to surprise the group. The person with the cap then told them to forget about it, stating that he preferred something cold, and began asking for permission to order a cold Americano. At that moment, Taea interrupted her, holding a knife in her direction, and asked if she was serious, to which the person with the cap sighed, questioning if he was serious. Outside, a narrow alley stretched along the side of the building, containing some garbage bags and air conditioning units. On the wall. Back inside the cafe, someone from the group inquired about how the negotiations had gone and what the current situation was with Ocean. Taea looked to the side with an expression. Displaced residents would be relocated at no cost, with rent-free housing in the new apartments following the redevelopment, and no charges incurred during construction. After the relocation, any property sale, it would have to go through a company designated by Oceon, which would receive 50% of the profits based on the property's initial value. Taea reflected that the terms were unexpectedly better than what he had anticipated, although there was a catch. Back at the cafe, Suyeon, the second-generation boss of the Yaburi gang, asked in surprise if he wanted her to step down from her position. Taea confirmed that this had been the final condition presented by Jail Chin during the negotiation. In the lounge, Taea's expression remained serious as he processed the information. During his campaign against organized crime, since then, no one has opposed criminal groups, turning the country into a place mired in violence and money. The boy, from their earlier conversation. During that conversation, Taea had turned to Jae-pil Kim and asked if he was referring to Miss Suryeon. Jae-pil Kim then wanted to know if Taea had any knowledge of the one who taught Suryeon to use Usari and her custom-made weapons in combat. Ta responded that, while he didn't know the specifics, he was aware she had trained with someone previously. To leave abruptly, Jae-pil Chin proposed one more condition, that the leadership of the Yaburi gang be transferred to Huari. Ta, slightly surprised by the demand, asked if it would be out of line for him to question the reason. Jae-pil Kim explained that, officially, the reason was to make communication with Hwanong easier for Ocean, but unofficially, the IPL story was different, he continued, saying it was a precautionary measure, however small, since ultimately only one person in Korea used that type of weapon. In the present, at the cafe, Boy then asked who that person was and if her mentor was someone so renowned. She began by saying she couldn't be completely certain, but when a scout had appeared with the offer, his father was quite surprised. The proposal was to join the best group in the area, or something along those lines. Since they promised good pay, she ended up accepting, as she felt trapped in a big house all day. Taea, speaking of which, had something important to add. He thought it would be best for the Yaburi gang to remain under Oseon's leadership. The other two were very surprised by the idea, and one of them questioned what he was saying. He then stated that Jae-pil also agreed, and that even if they became a faction under Oseon in name only, that's what they would really be. But it cuts off there. Suron quickly stood up, objecting vehemently. Despite his gratitude, he firmly rejected the proposal, claiming that, I was wandering the streets, lost in thought. Yes, the Cheongu Group had allied with criminal organizations to bribe the media and suppress their competitors. Investing in Oseon was to blame for his father's condition, and that they could not serve an enemy. He insisted that this was the only way to save his father, and continued to remind them that his father still was at Cheongu Hospital, and her safety would be the first to be compromised when Cheongu noticed Inuan was missing. Still, she seemed reluctant and shocked by the situation. At that moment, footsteps approached, and a voice ordered them to do as he said, calling for the boss. A group of men appeared, including one with his arm in a sling. He declared that he believed it would be wise for them to also be under Ocean's command. Surprised, she worried, telling the newcomer that she had told him not to push himself too hard. He then argued that, if they didn't join Ocean now, Cheongu would surely return seeking revenge, and when that happened, it wouldn't be with mercenaries, but with his actual forces, which it would be very dangerous. Taea looked at the man who mentioned Cheongu's safety. His eyes showed he was paying close attention to what was being said. The man continued, explaining that a lot of blood had been spilled for 3 years, and that no one was safe, not parents, friends, or neighbors. He added that even knowing Jisub was alive in Cheongu Hospital, no one dared to speak out, fearing what might be done to him. Damage. He asserted that he would fight, and if he died trying, at least he would know he had tried, but he was worried about his daughter and had a small favor to ask. Then, addressing the chief, he said that the neighborhood's strength didn't come from Gizub or anyone else, but from her, who protected and led them. They all bowed in a sign of respect, and he thanked her for everything she had done. He warned her that she had a lot to lose if she betrayed them. Tears welled up in his eyes at those words. Suryun wiped his face and adjusted his cap, telling him not to be so dramatic. Entertainment and sports, causing the population to lose interest in politics to the point where even a dog could become a candidate. Still, people continued to claim that the Cheongu Group was He accepted the decision and, smiling, invited everyone to get a drink. Someone enthusiastically suggested they go to Bauman Restaurant and that they would need tables outside. Meanwhile, Tae observed the group. From afar, he thoughtfully placed the cup on the table, stating that with Inju's fingerprints secured, entering the council meeting would no longer be a problem. Confident, he thought that it was his turn to claim victory, and Cheon simply had to wait. The car sped off as someone inside inquired whether Director Inju's location had been found yet. Director Pyoto Hank, a council member and supporter of the vice president, wanted to know if there were any updates regarding the situation. A woman on the phone reported that, unfortunately, he had not yet been found, and that the public relations and human resources departments at headquarters were working together to locate him. He wasn't found at his residence, and it was reported that 2 lions, which the director kept there, were found shot to death. Shocked, Director Pyoto Hank asked if the lions had been shot, and the person on the phone confirmed that yes, that seemed to be the case. The woman continued, revealing that they were also contacted by the Ocean faction, who informed them that Director Hong proceeded with the redevelopment plans. In the 3rd district of Hangseo, Ocean alleged a violation of the armistice and declared complete control over the redevelopment, which greatly surprised Pyoto Hank. He wondered what the hell was going on, thinking that Director Hong might be an incompetent man, appointed to his position only because he was favored by Chon Hin. He didn't understand how he had disappeared so recklessly and began to suspect foul play, fearing the consequences for his representative. Suddenly, someone called out Pyoto, startling him, and company that benefited the people. Ta calmly walks into a shop, where the shop assistant welcomes him. Both he and another boy order a package of product name. They glance at each other for a moment, not stammering, Vice President. Huan Buyong, the Vice President of the Cheongu Group and a member of the Board of Directors, asked to be reminded again of the director's representative's name. Honorable, the scene shifted to Cheongu City, specifically to a building in Yido Ward, Yongpo District, the location of Cheongu's headquarters. Director Injuhan, a supporter of Cheong, was there. Jin, visibly injured, mentioned that the council meeting was being held on the 60th floor. Taea, who was with him, confirmed this and inquired if the executive board consisted of those 15 members. Right? Director Injuhan remained silent, appearing visibly tense, as a knife was pressed against his neck, and he stammered, confirming that it was indeed correct. The young man then reminded Injuhan that he wasn't being kept alive solely to extract information. He already possessed enough information. He was simply verifying what he already knew. Confused, the director then questioned the reason and what he wanted from him. The captor stated that he wanted nothing, while another person, surprised by this, questioned that response. He explained that even if Injuhan were to return to the executive board, he would be ruined regardless. It is revealed that Hanseo handed over Ocean, especially after being appointed by Chonjin. The young man claimed that, having lost Chon's favor, death was the only option left, leading him to, he was told to think about what he would have to do to survive. Then, he was instructed to think carefully, because he was not to kill him. With that, he turned and began to walk away from the place, his footsteps echoing. The young man turned his head when he heard the question of whether he was already leaving. A group was waiting for him, and Suri asked if he was leaving without saying goodbye, especially after leaving Injan tied up like that. He responded that, despite appearances, Inju was still a director at GU and useful for containing potential Ocean offensives against his redevelopment plans, but he added with a slight smile that if his presence, understanding how such a coincidence could have occurred. Slightly irritated, the protagonist decides to change his selection. However, they both have the same idea and simultaneously ask for a product name plus. Both became intolerable. They just had to call him, and he would take care of the matter. Then he turned to one of the men in the group waiting for him. The silver-haired man asked about the promise he had made, wondering if he intended to keep it. A memory flashed through his mind of when the young man asked Grai if he didn't want to advance to a higher arena. He reached out and touched Grai's shoulder and warned him that Cheongu might cause trouble, asking him to stand firm until the situation calmed down. The woman and the other man expressed their gratitude as they said goodbye for everything. Ta replied that it was a pleasure and bid them farewell with a "see you soon." The scene shifted to a long, empty runway under a clear sky. 2 men were conversing on the runway, one asking if the other had heard that Director Han would have a representative, and the other confirming that he had. One of them noticed that his partner had started smoking again, and the other simply confirmed it. The first one commented that he envied him since he couldn't even chew gum without getting scolded, to which the other replied that he talked too much. A young man was blowing a bubble of gum commented that that's why they should have received a raise when they asked for it politely. Jun Yok Wang, an executive bodyguard from Cheonggye Security, asked for their opinions, wondering if they would likely support the vice president. A distraught man wearing glasses protested that this was different from what he had been promised and requested that his transfer be reconsidered. John Min-moon, another executive bodyguard, said maybe, but it didn't matter. They just had to follow the captain. The supporters of Chong Jin and the vice president were clearly visible, and Mr. Jin was confident of victory with the backing of 7 counselors. Jun Yok Wang continued, stating that if Director John's representative was indeed that man, the decision of who would assume the presidency would rest with the 2 neutral members.